Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back into the foggy alleys and candlelit corridors of 1600s Amsterdam. You're about to wake up in one of the richest, weirdest and most unpredictable cities in the world. But let's get something straight. You probably won't survive this. Between the fire hazards, the plague and the threat of being crushed by a cartload of salted herring barrels, let's just say life expectancy isn't exactly trending up. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps me out, sure, but more importantly it means you get to time travel with me again tomorrow. Leave a comment with your city and the time you're watching. I want to see who's joining me and when. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake in a bed that's less of a bed and more of a wooden cupboard built into the wall. It's called a box bed, and it's exactly what it sounds like. A cramped, dark, blanket-filled rectangle with heavy curtains that block the worst of the morning chill, and also, unfortunately, the smell. The room is dim. A faint grey light leaks around the edge of the shutters, casting a smudged silhouette of the window frame across the floorboards. The canal just outside is still and quiet, though you hear a distant creak of an oar and the faint splash of something, or someone. You groan, stretching your legs until your feet knock into the end of the bed. Tall people are not meant for this century. You sit up, hitting your head on the low frame, and finally peel back the curtain. The air is cold enough to make you shiver and your breath shows faintly. No central heating here, just a fireplace downstairs and a whole lot of wishing. The floorboards creak as you step down, avoiding the worst of the splinters with your woolen stockings. The bed was shared, of course. Privacy in this city, that's a luxury few can afford. Maybe you had your spouse next to you, or your sibling, or a child, depending on your station in life. The room is narrow, with low ceilings, tilted floors, and windows that have seen centuries of grime layered between leaded panes. Every piece of furniture is double duty. A chest is also a bench. A table folds against the wall, and if you live above your shop, as many do, the smell of smoked fish or leatherwork creeps into your dreams and clings to your pillow. Welcome to your canal house, 3 to 5 stories tall, leaning slightly forward like it's bowing to the street. Everything creaks. Stairs, beams, your knees. The walls groan like they remember the weight of every century before this one. You wrap yourself in a wool cloak and shuffle downstairs. There's no clock in the room, but you know it's nearly time. The city runs on the rhythm of bells. The Westerkerk will chime soon, and the entire block will stir like a colony of ants in velvet and lace. On your way down, you pass the family shrine or Bible stand depending on your denomination, assuming you're bold enough to display it openly. One wrong theological choice and you could be in deep, deep trouble. Amsterdam is tolerant, sort of, but only if you keep it discreet. You reach the kitchen, if you can call it that. It's really just a corner with a hearth, a few clay pots, and a cutting board worn smooth by generations of hands. There's no sugar unless you're loaded, no coffee unless you're really loaded, and the milk's probably already turned. But you've got bread. Dense, dark rye bread. You slice it, tear it, maybe dip it in a bit of dripping if you have any left. There's butter if it's a lucky day. And beer. Yes, beer for breakfast. It's safer than water, and everyone from toddlers to grandmas drinks it. As you chew, you hear the bells. Low and echoing, they ripple out across the rooftops and canals like a sonic map of the city. Church bells, market bells, ship bells, all knelling the start of another day of trade, toil, and surviving your own plumbing, which, by the way, is non-existent. If you need to go, there's a ceramic pot under the bed, or a shared privy in the yard, and once that's full, you carry it to the street or drop it directly into the canal, depending on your mood and moral compass. You head to the window and unlatch the shutters. Outside, the city is stirring. A neighbour is beating a rug out of her second-story window, a cloud of dust catching the morning light. Across the canal, a man in a wide-brimmed hat tosses stale bread to the ducks, or maybe he's just trying to get rid of it. The roof steams faintly, tiled and mossy, sloped like crooked teeth. Somewhere a dog barks. Somewhere else, a cat screeches in protest. From here you can smell the city waking up. It's not pretty. It's a stew of damp wood, smoke, fish guts, manure, sea air, and human life. You wrinkle your nose and breathe it in anyway. Because this is what prosperity smells like. Amsterdam in the 1600s is at its peak. This is the Dutch Golden Age. You're at the centre of a global trade empire, living in a city that sits atop stacks of wooden pylons, surrounded by hundreds of canals with ships sailing in from all corners of the earth. Spices, textiles, silver, furs, porcelain, all funnel through your city. And you? You're trying not to spill your breakfast beer as you open the front door. You have a long day ahead. Maybe you're a merchant. Maybe you're a craftsman, or the spouse of one. Maybe you're a servant in one of the wealthier households. Or maybe you own that household, and the servant is busy boiling your laundry in lye water. No matter your rank, the city is alive around you, loud, colourful, and crowded. The streets are narrow and slick with last night's rain. The canal boats are already moving, flat-bottomed, piled with goods and passengers. The shop signs creak in the breeze, painted with pictures because most people can't read. A fish, a key, a boot. If you see a tulip, that one's probably a scam. You step outside. The cobblestones are uneven beneath your feet. A porter runs past, nearly knocking over a basket of apples. A woman calls out in Dutch, loud and raspy, offering dried eels. A horse snorts. A rat darts. You take a breath, tighten your cloak and start walking. Amsterdam has begun again. You don't make it far before your stomach growls again, because that sliver of bread and splash of breakfast beer didn't do much except remind your body how hungry it already was. But you're used to it. Most mornings in Amsterdam start like this, with a bit of bread, a bit of noise, and not nearly enough time to sit down and be human. That's not how things work here. You live on a tight schedule marked by bells, tides, and customers banging on your door earlier than they should. And no, there's no such thing as weekend brunch. Down the stairs, out the door, and the city spills out in front of you like a messy oil painting. Rich, chaotic, full of too many layers. The canal glistens under a pale, uncertain sun. Smoke curls out of chimneys like lazy questions, and boats glide quietly beneath bridges, their oarsmen wrapped in cloaks, faces downturned against the bite of early wind. You move along the edge of the water, passing shop fronts and stoops where the early risers are already busy. A baker sweeps flour dust out the door with aggressive, sleep-deprived determination. Next door, someone's dragging out a barrel of something that definitely smells like pickled herring and sadness. A bell rings again, different this time, sharper. That's the Zuidkerk Tower, signalling the quarter hour. You've got a bit of time before the day gets truly chaotic, so you veer off toward a familiar little stall tucked beneath a slanted roof near the bridge. It's run by a woman who sells warm cheese pastries when she can get them, and if not, something involving onions, rye, and hope. You hand her a small coin, and she hands you something warm and vaguely edible, wrapped in paper that smells faintly of soap. You nod, grateful. She nods back. Not much is said. It's too early for words. You sit on a short wooden bench along the canal's edge, watching the mist lift. A dog sniffs at your boot and moves on. Seagulls squawk overhead like they own the place, which, to be fair, they kind of do. The city is louder now. Footsteps slap stone. Voices rise and fall in a dozen dialects, and you hear the sudden clatter of a cart as its wheel hits a pothole with a jolt. Behind you, a church door opens, and a group of schoolboys file out, their breath puffing like little chimney stacks. One of them hurls a clump of mud at another, which explodes against a wall. Everyone pretends they didn't see it. But you see everything. That's part of living here. You're constantly aware of smells, of noises, of proximity. The houses are too close, the canals are too shallow, the streets are too narrow. Everything in Amsterdam is packed in, layered, and always just a little damp. Which means you spend your days in a kind of constant motion, trying to stay warm, trying to stay dry, trying to stay ahead of whatever is creeping toward your shoes. You look down at your clothes, quickly brushing off a smear of something unidentifiable, possibly mud, possibly rat. Fashion here depends entirely on your station and your intent for the day. If you're a craftsman, you're in sturdy wool and maybe a leather apron. If you're a merchant, you wear something slightly finer, breeches, doublet, maybe a felt hat if you're feeling optimistic. Women wear layered gowns, stiff bodices, and linen coifs that itch like judgment itself. And if you're rich, oh, then it's all about lace. Stiff lace, layered lace, imported lace. Any fabric that says, I've never once touched my own chamber pot. Still, even the wealthiest among you have to be practical. The city is built on marshland and everything is just a little off kilter. You've probably noticed that the houses lean forward, slightly but unmistakably. That's on purpose. The facades are designed that way so that when goods are hoisted up by pulley to the upper floors, they don't smack into the building on the way up. Clever, yes. But also slightly terrifying when you're standing beneath a dangling crate of sugar being hauled 3 stories overhead by a rope that looks very old. You head toward the city centre, your path taking you across a narrow bridge crowded with carts, goats, and a pair of musicians playing something suspiciously like a love song on a flute and a drum. The air smells of wet stone and stale beer now, with just a hint of urine, because let's face it, the alleyway behind you is probably doubling as someone's personal convenience. Still, this is a good day. No plague carts, no recent fires, and the fog is lifting. For Amsterdam in the 1600s, that's practically a celebration. As you walk, you pass a group of men in conversation. Loud, gesturing, red-faced types, merchants or guild members, by the look of their hats. They're arguing about trade routes and taxes, but one of them keeps glancing over his shoulder like he's expecting someone to interrupt. You can't help but catch a snatch of the conversation, something about East India ships delayed by monsoons. You nod to yourself. The VOC, the Dutch East India Company, runs half the world from offices just a few streets away, and delays like that ripple through every inch of the city. If the ships are late, the spices are late. If the spices are late, the buyers are angry, and if the buyers are angry, no one gets paid. Your path finally opens up to a square. Flagstones slick from dew, pigeons flapping away as you arrive. A man nearby hawks oranges out of a wooden crate, which is absurd because they're outrageously expensive and bruised to hell. But still, the idea of oranges in Amsterdam in winter, that's the kind of flex the rich can't resist. You see a boy eyeing one hungrily before being yanked away by a nursemaid whose patience is clearly spent. In the centre of the square stands a large clock tower, and beneath it, a row of women with baskets full of goods, vegetables, herbs, bread, and something that smells strongly of smoked eel. You don't stop. You've got places to be. But you do slow down long enough to witness a minor miracle. A toothless man juggling 3 apples while singing a sea shanty in what might be Frisian. A small crowd watches, half amused, half bewildered, and here's your fringe fact of the morning. Juggling was actually considered a respectable profession in parts of the Dutch Republic. As long as you weren't a jester or accused of witchcraft, of course. Always that asterisk. As the sun climbs just a little higher, the city shifts from waking to working. Market stalls fill, canal boats jostle, and the day begins in earnest. You pull your cloak tighter, duck your head beneath the low beam of a storefront and keep moving. You've got to be at the warehouse before the midday bell, and the city waits for no one, especially not you. You only make it halfway down the block before your nose starts staging a protest. The smells, already a full-on orchestra of chaos, have turned up a notch. There's a sharp sting of vinegar drifting from a pickle barrel stand, a wet meaty funk that has to be coming from a fishmonger's stall around the corner, and beneath it all, the sour undercurrent of sewage quietly making its presence known, like a rude uncle at a dinner party. You press your sleeve to your nose and breathe through the wool, which doesn't help much. It just adds sweat and mildew to the mix. Amsterdam in the 1600s is nothing if not aromatic, and if you think this is bad, wait until midsummer. Right now, in this cool early light, it's tolerable. But as the city warms, everything ripens. Chamber pots are dumped into the canals with varying levels of discretion. Fish guts pile up behind market stalls, waiting for the right tide to carry them away. Tanners, bleachers, and butchers dump their runoff into ditches that were never designed for such crimes against nature. And then, of course, there's the canal itself. Beautiful from a distance, a swirling cocktail of refuse, rot, and dead eels up close. Still, you're used to it. Everyone is. The smell is part of life, like the sound of bells or the tilt of the city beneath your feet. Most people don't even comment on it unless it's exceptionally bad, like when a dead pig bloats and floats past your front stoop, or someone's been hoarding dung for too long in a corner yard. But right now, the air is merely aggressive, not actively threatening, and you've got places to be. You pick up your pace. A woman with a basket passes you, muttering about spoiled leeks, and behind her a barefoot boy is trying to sell something that looks suspiciously like singed pigeons on sticks. You look away. Some things are better left unconfirmed. The city is damp beneath your boots. Even on dry days, the cobblestones weep moisture like they're tired of holding it all in. That's the thing. Amsterdam isn't really on land. It's built on thousands of wooden pylons hammered deep into swampy soil centuries ago, like someone balancing a mansion on toothpicks. You walk through neighbourhoods that feel like they're floating. Houses lean, streets sag, cellars flood, and when it rains hard, you wade. Still, this watery chaos is the city's lifeblood. The canals, though disgusting, are essential arteries. Goods arrive here from all over the world, brought in on wide, flat-bottomed boats steered with long poles and louder voices. Right now, you pause on a bridge to watch one glide beneath you. It's piled with barrels, probably salted cod from Norway or herring from the Zuiderzee. Two men in patched wool guide it, one of them smoking a pipe that threatens to set his beard on fire every time he talks. Further down the canal, a barge is unloading at a dock behind a tavern, its crew handing off sacks of flour like they're precious gems, and to them, they are. Grain prices fluctuate wildly. One bad harvest in the Baltic and half of Amsterdam goes hungry or broke, or both. You learned that last winter when you traded the last of your silver belt buckle for a sack of gritty rye flour that barely lasted a week. You step off the bridge and nearly collide with a porter who's balancing an entire side of beef on his shoulder. He doesn't apologise. No one does, really. The streets are too tight, and the pace is too fast. You sidestep, murmur something that sounds vaguely polite, and keep moving. As you round a corner, the wind shifts and the smell hits you even harder. This street runs parallel to a tannery. You'd forgotten. The stench of soaked hides, lime, and decomposing hair is immediate and visceral. It grabs your sinuses, punches your throat, and makes your eyes water. You pull your cloak tighter and hurry past. You glance inside through a warped glass window and catch sight of a man scraping something unidentifiable off a hide stretched on a wooden frame. The floor beneath him is black with grime, and a bucket steams ominously in the corner. Fringe fact time. Tanners were often considered unclean in every sense, physically, morally, spiritually. They were essential to society, of course. Everyone needed leather. But few wanted to live near them or marry into their families. Some guilds wouldn't even accept them. Still, the work paid. If you could survive the smell, the burns from the lime, and the occasional infection from handling rotting flesh, you might just make a living. A miserable one, but a living. You hold your breath and power walk past the tannery, only to catch a new scent in the breeze. Something sweeter, gentler. Warm oil, roasted nuts, maybe even cinnamon. Salvation. Just ahead is a bakery. And not just any bakery. This one supplies the wealthier families with their white bread and sweet rolls. You can't afford their wares most days, but the smell alone is enough to lift your spirits. You linger near the doorway as a young apprentice carries out a tray of steaming loaves. He catches your eye and offers a crooked smile, then disappears back inside. You breathe deeply and try to imagine what this city smells like to someone arriving for the first time. A sailor from Italy, maybe, or a fur trader from Muscovy. They'd probably be overwhelmed, offended, maybe even sick. But then again, you think, they'd get used to it. Everyone does. Smell becomes background music after a while, an invisible soundtrack to life in the Golden Age. Still, even scholars debate just how much the city stank. Some letters and journals mention unbearable conditions, especially in the summer months. Others barely comment on it at all. Was it truly horrendous, or were people just so acclimated that they stopped noticing? No one agrees, and no one left a smell sample behind, thank God. You duck down a quieter street to avoid the fish market that's just starting up. That one's more aggressive than usual. Something about brined eels in open barrels that makes your whole body retreat inward. Instead, you head toward the warehouse district, following the curve of the canal and the growing noise of cranes, ropes, shouting, and wooden wheels. It's almost beautiful in a grimy, chaotic kind of way. The city heaves and breathes with life, its smell woven into its rhythm. And here you are, boots damp, cloak heavy, breath fogging in the morning chill, just another person moving through it. You're used to the odour now. You'd even miss it if it were gone. Almost. You're halfway through the warehouse district now, dodging carts and crates, when you spot a familiar face. Martin, the barrel maker, shoulders like a draft horse and hands big enough to crush walnuts by accident. He grunts a greeting, barely looking up as he hoists another iron hoop onto a cask. You return the nod. That's the etiquette here. Acknowledge. Don't interrupt. Everyone's got somewhere to be, something to fix, or someone waiting to yell at them. And even if you don't, you pretend you do. That's how you survive in a city this crowded and this competitive. The early sun slants low between buildings, painting long shadows across the cobblestones. You pass a row of men stacking crates into a boat, the ropes creaking under weight, their breath puffing out in visible bursts. They're loading goods bound for the Baltic, grain, maybe, or salted herring. One of them breaks into a song you vaguely recognise, some sea shanty about a sailor and a tavern girl who wasn't exactly a tavern girl, if you know what I mean. You keep walking. You duck into a narrow alley, barely wide enough for your shoulders, hem brushing against brick walls slick with moss. This shortcut saves you 5 minutes, but it comes with the added bonus of questionable puddles and the ever-present possibility of rat traffic. Still, you emerge into the light feeling victorious, and just in time to see a street hawker setting up his cart with a practiced rhythm. Dried fruit, candied nuts, and something that might be licorice if you squint. His cart bears the familiar symbol of his guild, painted in fading blue and gold. Guilds are everything here. You can't spit without hitting a guild-certified craftsman or merchant. Bakers, coopers, cobblers, brewers, bookbinders, each trade with its own codes, bylaws, and mandatory meetings that often involve more beer than business. If you're in a guild, you have protection, status, and a better shot at avoiding starvation. If you're not, good luck. You might still survive, but you're outside the system, and Amsterdam doesn't look kindly on outsiders, unless they bring exotic goods and don't cause too much trouble. You pull your cloak tighter and keep moving. The air is warming, the chill slowly giving way to a damp heaviness that clings to your sleeves. You pass a group of women hanging linens between two buildings, the fabric flapping in the breeze like surrender flags. One of them pauses to scratch her scalp under her linen cap. Another, younger, stares down at the canal water below with a look you know too well. Half boredom, half dream. You've had that look too, especially when the days stretch out long and the city feels like it's pressing in on all sides. You finally reach your destination, a modest cloth shop wedged between a printmaker and a tobacco merchant. The door creaks as you push it open, and the bell overhead gives a reluctant jingle. Inside, it smells of wool, dust, and something faintly spicy. Probably a sachet hidden in a drawer to ward off moths. The shopkeeper looks up from his ledger, squinting at you over thick spectacles. You exchange greetings, formal and clipped, before turning to your task. Collecting a parcel of dyed linen, wrapped tightly and bound with twine. You sling the parcel under your arm and head back out, nearly getting sideswiped by a pair of boys running full tilt down the street. One's barefoot, one's bleeding from the elbow, and both are laughing like devils. That's another constant here. Children everywhere, ducking under carts, scaling door frames, screaming joyfully in languages only they understand. Childhood in Amsterdam is equal parts freedom and filth. If you're lucky, you start working by 7 or 8. If you're not, you're probably still working, just not for money. As you round the next corner, you nearly trip over a wooden sign laid flat across the street. It reads wet paint in 4 languages and is entirely ignored by everyone. A painter above, perched on a rickety scaffold, is working on the exterior of a house, muted red with cream trim. He spits over the edge, narrowly missing a cat perched on the windowsill below. The cat glares and remains seated. And here's something you didn't know you'd learn today. The colours of houses in this city are a subtle code. Dark green trim, modestly wealthy, likes to show it. Red shutters, might be Catholic. Blue window frames, possibly just trendy, or Sephardic Jewish. There's no official guidebook, but people talk. Everything here means something, even if it means, I just like this colour, please stop asking. You move past another merchant stall and pause. This one has imported wares, Chinese porcelain, Ottoman silks, ivory combs, and a small box labelled Curiosities from the New World. Inside are a few feathers, a dried beetle the size of your thumb, and something that might be a human tooth. The merchant smiles when he sees you peering. Only one of those killed a man, he says, winking. You decline to ask which. Amsterdam's trade is booming in this century. The city is the centre of a global network of ships and spices, of silks and sugar and human beings sold as property. It's thrilling and monstrous all at once. Every crate that passes through the harbour holds a story, some of discovery, some of devastation. And you? You're just trying to keep your boots clean. There's a scholar's debate you overheard once in a tavern, loud, boozy, and full of hand gestures, about whether Amsterdam's rise is a miracle or a crime. Is it genius or greed that built this place? Did the canals make the city? Or did the ambition of men carve those canals out of mud with bare hands and stolen money? No one agreed, of course. They never do. You continue down the street, your arms full, your mind already racing ahead to your next stop. The bells begin to ring again, deep and measured, telling you you've got less time than you thought. Somewhere behind you, a fight breaks out. 2 sailors, probably. You don't turn around. That's someone else's problem. Right now, you've got a lunch appointment and a sore back. You pause at the next intersection, letting a goat cart pass. A real one, led by a teenage girl with a whip and a look that says she's not to be messed with. The goats trot past like minor royalty, unfazed by the traffic. You nod your respect. This city never stops. It stinks. It sings. It stumbles. And you, right now, are in the thick of it, weaving through the clatter and clang of everyday life in a place so strange, so brilliant and so broken, it might just outlive all of you. You don't technically have to take the canal route, but something about the slow, rhythmic motion of water calls to you today. Your feet are sore, your shoulders ache from the cloth parcel digging in, and honestly, the street's too loud. So when you spot a low ferry boat docked along the edge, bobbing slightly in the murky current, you make your move. The ferryman gives you a half nod, half suspicious squint, standard fare for someone not paying in advance, and you step aboard with all the grace of someone who hasn't slept well in 2 decades. The boat lurches away from the dock with a push of the ferryman's pole, and you're off, gliding between narrow house-lined canals like a letter sliding into an envelope. The buildings lean toward you from both sides, tall and narrow, with pointed gables and fat-bellied windows that reflect the water in dreamy ripples. You can see your reflection too, blurry, stretched, vaguely haunted. But who looks fresh these days? You exhale slowly. It's quieter here. The water slaps gently against the hull. A gull calls overhead, and somewhere far off, a church bell rings, echoing between the rows of brick. The city doesn't rest, but it does shift moods, and this moment, this lazy, floating pause, feels like a secret. Ahead, the canal curves slightly, and the boat passes beneath a low bridge so tight you duck without thinking. Above, a woman leans over the railing to shake crumbs from a cloth, and a pigeon immediately dive bombs to investigate. You wonder, as always, what it would be like to live in one of these canal houses. The tall, skinny ones with beams sticking out like jutting noses. Some are painted bright, others faded to soot grey. All of them are packed tight, like books on a shelf, hiding lives you'll never quite understand. And inside those lives, entire worlds, shopkeepers and sailors, rich merchants hoarding spices and paintings, widows renting out attic space to young artists who pay and promise in debt, children sleeping 3 to a bed, a woman whispering her prayers in secret because her version of God isn't welcome, a man with a limp who counts every coin before he crosses his own threshold. You float past all of it, and it doesn't see you. Not really. The city is watching itself. The boat glides past a floating market where vendors perched on their own barges shout prices at passers-by on footbridges above. There's everything here. Sacks of onions, baskets of eggs, bunches of herbs, barrels of pickles so pungent the smell reaches you midstream. One woman is selling oysters by the dozen, handing them off wrapped in waxy paper. Another hawks what she calls exotic fruit that, to your untrained eye, looks suspiciously like pears. The ferryman steers with quiet precision, using a long pole to push off the canal's bottom. He's not the chatty type, most of them aren't. Canal workers hear and see too much to waste words. They know every shortcut, every smell, every shift in the wind. If the ferryman thinks it's going to rain, you'd best grab your cloak. As the boat rounds another bend, the grandeur of the harbour opens up before you like a scene painted by a man with too much time and not enough grey paint. Masts rise like skeletal trees, ships rocking in the tide, their sails furled and stained with salt and smoke. Crates are hoisted by cranes that groan like dying whales. Sailors curse in every language under the sun. The smell here is something else entirely. A deep, bitter blend of salt, tar, sweat and foreign spices so strong it might actually be flammable. You pass close to a moored East Indiaman, one of those massive VOC ships that's brought back cargo from Java or Ceylon. You can see the crew on deck. Half of them look half dead. Sunburned skin, worn hands, bleary eyes. You don't envy them. Months at sea, fighting storms, rats, boredom and sometimes each other, and all for nutmeg and porcelain. But when that nutmeg sells for 20 times its weight in gold, The risks start to make a twisted kind of sense. You've heard rumours, who hasn't, of men who set off for the Indies and came back rich enough to buy a canal house in full. You've also heard of the ones who never came back at all, or came back missing limbs, or came back with stories they'll never tell. The VOC, for all its glory, is not gentle. It's a machine of commerce, power and blood. Everyone in Amsterdam knows it, even if they pretend otherwise. The boat pulls alongside another dock, and the ferryman gestures with his chin. You climb out, tossing him a coin that's probably too little, and he gives you the same squint he gave you earlier. Still, he nods, and the boat drifts away. You watch it go, then turn toward the street ahead, where the bustle resumes in full force like someone turned the volume back up. You're in the merchant quarter now, where the buildings are taller, the streets are cleaner, and the people wear their money where you can see it. Velvet cloaks, gold-stitched gloves, lace cuffs that cost more than a sailor earns in a year. You walk past tall windows displaying luxury goods, silk, porcelain, paintings, and try not to look too interested. The shopkeepers here have eyes like hawks and noses like money hounds. You pause to admire a shop front where a new ledger book is displayed, bound in leather with brass corners. It's absurdly expensive, of course, but still, there's something comforting about the clean geometry of blank pages. All those empty lines waiting to be filled with transactions, names, debts, dreams. You wonder what your own name might look like written in such a book, sandwiched between imports and hopes. You move on, stepping aside for a man and woman strolling arm in arm, trailed by a servant carrying a box. They're laughing about something. Probably the price of saffron, or a failed dinner party involving undercooked duck. You don't look back. A fringe fact for your ferry ride. Here it is. Amsterdam had more canals than Venice in the 1600s, over 100 kilometres worth. And while many were built for trade and transport, plenty were just glorified trash chutes. Still, in a city where streets flood and the ground literally sinks beneath your feet, water isn't just a feature, it's the very framework. And if you fell in, let's just say you'd better not have any open wounds. You pass under an arch where a small shrine is tucked into the brick. A fading painting of St. Nicholas, protector of sailors and merchants. Someone's left a few coins at the base, along with a small shell. You pause, nod politely. Amsterdam may be Calvinist now, officially, but the old symbols remain. Quiet, hidden, persistent. You look up at the sky. The clouds are gathering. The ferryman was right. You can hear the market before you see it. It starts as a low buzz, voices colliding, haggling, barking, and builds to a full-bodied roar as you round the final bend. The square opens up like a stage, chaotic and dazzling. Every stall a scene, every vendor a character, every customer a potential argument in the making. You've arrived at the beating heart of Amsterdam's daily rhythm, the marketplace. Equal parts commerce and theatre, it smells like ambition, desperation, and about 7 different kinds of salted fish. The first thing that hits you is the sheer variety. You've got piles of herring stacked like scaly dominoes next to heaps of tulip bulbs guarded like treasure. A man with a missing tooth is shouting the merits of his apples, which have clearly seen better days, while a young woman, barefoot and ferociously charming, sells pastries that look suspiciously smaller than the last time you saw her. And then there are the spice vendors, their stalls perfumed with impossible richness, cinnamon, nutmeg, saffron, cloves. You pause near one now, catching a whiff of something so sweet and so far from home, it almost makes you forget where you are. And here comes a classic Amsterdam moment. 2 vendors, one selling smoked eels, the other dried fruit, are screaming at each other over the space between their stalls. Something about whose barrel is too close to whose crate. You sidestep instinctively as a particularly plump pear goes flying through the air and splats against the cobblestones. Nobody is shocked. The crowd doesn't even blink. You, wisely, keep moving. The crowd is thick, a swirling soup of social classes and accents. You overhear Dutch, French, German, something Slavic, and at least one sentence of English, badly mangled and shouted with confidence. There's a group of Mennonite farmers trading pickled cabbage for eggs, a bald man selling exotic birds from a bamboo cage, and a lace-clad woman inspecting oranges like she's judging a beauty contest. A beggar limps by, hands outstretched, muttering prayers in Latin, and a city watchman stands at the edge of it all, arms crossed, eyes scanning like a cat that's just waiting for a rat to slip. You make your way to a familiar stall near the centre, run by an older woman named Neeltje, who sells fabrics, yarns, and always seems to know who's pregnant before they do. She greets you with a nod and a look that says, "You're late." You shrug. She shrugs back. That's the deal. You buy a spool of indigo thread and a bit of linen cord, passing her a coin and a soft thank you. She says nothing, but you know she'll ask about your cousin next time, like she always does. Beside her stall, a small boy is selling waxed writing tablets. Cheap ones, carved with initials and tied with frayed ribbon. He tries to catch your eye with a grin that's missing a few front teeth. You wave him off gently. You're not here for trinkets today. Still, you appreciate the hustle. Everyone in this market is surviving by the minute. You squeeze past a basket of live chickens and duck under a beam holding up a canopy of sun-faded cloth. You're heading toward the far end, where the less respectable goods tend to be sold. The merchants here don't have fancy painted signs or city permits, but they do have everything from knockoff tulip bulbs to black market books. A wiry man tries to sell you a genuine map of the New World, drawn in ink so fresh it smudges when you touch it. You smile and decline. He shrugs, already offering it to the next fool behind you. And then you see something odd. A barrel filled with glass bottles sealed and labelled with neat little tags. You peer closer. Each one contains something suspended in liquid. A frog, a flower, a fetal pig. It's a travelling apothecary or maybe just a travelling weirdo. The man behind the barrel catches your eye and lifts a bottle with a severed bird foot floating inside. For gout, he says. Or luck. You mutter something vague and walk away, resisting the urge to look back. Fringe fact for today. Some scholars believe certain 1600s Amsterdam market stalls doubled as information networks. Gossip, smuggling, political pamphlets, all passed through hands pretending to sell cabbages or candles. There were rumours that a particular soap merchant was also distributing heretical texts, hidden in hollowed-out bars of lie. No one ever proved it, but she did get robbed 7 times in 2 years. Coincidence? You stop to buy a bit of cheese from a squat, red-faced man who calls everyone brother, whether he means it or not. His wheel of Edam has a crack in it, so you get it cheap. As you walk, you nibble at the corner. Sharp, salty, and just shy of rancid. Still better than most meals you've had this week. At the far edge of the market, a man with a tiny cart is hawking tulip bulbs like they're diamonds. He has a blackboard with chalk drawings of the flowers they'll supposedly produce. Striped, flamed, twisted in ways that seem physically impossible. A few years ago, this whole area would have been swarming with men throwing fortunes at these bulbs. Tulip mania, they called it. Rich men ruined, paupers made princes, and then the bubble popped like a rotten pear. Now the craze is gone, but the hope? That lingers. Always does. You glance down at a bulb in your hand. Dirt still clings to it, its skin papery and light. It doesn't look like much. But according to the man behind the cart, it's a paragon red flame. You ask the price. He gives a number that makes you laugh. He doesn't laugh back. You hand it back and keep walking. As you exit the square, a man pushes past you carrying a wooden box filled with dead fish. One flops out, hits the ground with a wet smack, and is promptly stolen by a cat. The man doesn't even notice. Or maybe he just doesn't care. A final smell hits you on your way out. Roasted chestnuts. You can't resist. You toss a coin to the old woman manning the brazier and take a paper cone of them. Warm and sweet, fingers instantly soothed by the heat. You chew slowly as you walk back toward the canal, the chaos of the market fading behind you. Your boots are filthy. Your arms are full, your pocket is light, but your stomach's not empty, and in this city, that counts for something. The sun is higher now, casting golden light across the rooftops and bouncing off windows. The city gleams for a moment, just a flicker, like it's trying to be beautiful on purpose. You take the long way back, winding through quieter lanes that spill into shaded courtyards and back alleys, where the pace of life slows to a practical hum. These aren't the polished facades of Herengracht, or the theatrical stalls of the market. You're in the working lungs of the city now. Laundry flaps between windows like loose flags. Soap bubbles trickle into the gutters. And women, so many women, are everywhere. Sleeves rolled, brows damp, voices sharp, hands busy. It's easy to forget sometimes when you hear the songs about sailors and the tales of merchants that the real power humming beneath Amsterdam's golden age is not just built on ships and silver. It's also built on elbows deep in fish guts, fingers bloodied from lace needles, and backs bent over baskets of linen. The women of this city keep it spinning, and they do it with little thanks and even fewer options. You pass a fishwife first, her voice like a clarion bell as she calls out her wares. Her stall is simple, a low wooden table covered in slabs of silver-scaled herring, the air around it thick with salt and brine. She's got her sleeves tucked and her bodice cinched tight, muscles moving with the practiced ease of someone who's cleaned thousands of fish and doesn't give a single coin what anyone thinks about it. You make the mistake of catching her eye, and she offers you a deal on a whole smoke deal. You wave her off with a smile. She snorts, amused, and yells something about your shoes as you walk away. A little farther down, there's a lacemaker hunched in the shadow of a doorway, bobbins clicking so fast they're almost a blur. Her fingers move like she's not even thinking. The pattern more muscle memory than art. A tiny loop here, a twist there, tension just so. You slow to watch, hypnotized. It takes hours to make a strip the length of your hand, and most of it will be sold to someone who can't spell her name, let alone imagine this woman's rent. Her eyes flick up, catching yours for a second, and then flick right back down. Then there are the washerwomen. You hear them before you see them. Laughing, shouting, splashing. At a canal's edge, several of them are scrubbing linen against wooden paddles, their skirts hiked and tucked, arms glistening with sweat and soap. One of them swears in a way that could melt your ears, and the others burst into cackles. You catch a word that sounds like burgomaster, and something about his backside. These women have nothing to fear. They are the engine behind homes and shops, and they know it. You nod respectfully and move along, boots slick with soap runoff. In a courtyard just beyond, a nursemaid rocks a baby in a cradle while shelling peas into a bowl. She hums tunelessly, her eyes somewhere far away. Next to her, two girls are embroidering napkins, and judging by the tight set of their mouths, they've been told they'll be doing this until the sun falls out of the sky. You remember being told that girls of certain families are worth more when their stitches are straight than when their thoughts are. Some things haven't changed as much as they should. You pause again at a small door half open to the street. Inside is a dim shop where a widow sells second-hand books, legal documents, and, if you know the right knock, certain pamphlets banned by the church or the city. She's clever, this one. Twice fined, never caught. She gives you a sideways glance and subtly slides a Dutch translation of an Italian medical text across the table to a man in a lawyer's robe. He doesn't look at her. He just leaves a coin and disappears. She sees you watching and gives the smallest smirk before vanishing into the shadows of her shelves. Across from her, two older women sit in the sun mending nets. Fish nets, maybe, or laundry lines. Hard to tell anymore. They're too frayed to matter. Their faces are creased maps of a life lived by candlelight and hard bread. One hums a hymn while the other mutters about a neighbour's son who married a German girl with no shoes. You don't interrupt. You just drift past like a ghost, a visitor in this world where the rules are written by someone else. And here's the thing, these women, they are not exceptional. They are ordinary. That's what makes it extraordinary. You see them everywhere now. The street sweepers with their brooms and buckets, the cooks elbow deep in flour, the wives taking ledger notes in shops while their husbands drink themselves useless in taverns. There are women who own businesses too. Taverns, breweries, even apothecaries. It's not common, but it's not unheard of. Widows in particular gain a strange kind of freedom once their husbands die. Economic agency wrapped in mourning lace. Fringe fact incoming. By the mid-1600s, over 50% of Amsterdam's adult women were officially unmarried, either widowed or never wed. And while society still expected chastity and piety, these women often controlled property, managed shops and sued their neighbours with alarming precision. A few even wrote wills with language so salty it made the clerks blush. You hear a sharp argument up ahead and instinctively slow your steps. A woman with a basket full of eggs is shouting at a tax collector, loudly, publicly, without flinching. He's trying to enforce a fine for unlicensed selling. She's insisting she's done no such thing. She calls him a leech, a goat, a snake in a velvet cloak. He tries to speak over her. She raises her voice. Within seconds, the street has stopped to listen. You stop too. A younger woman tosses her a coin in solidarity, and the crowd murmurs approval. The collector eventually backs off, muttering threats. She stands tall, lips tight, chest heaving, eggs unbroken. You exhale slowly. That's Amsterdam. You can buy the world here. Spices, silk, glass. gold. But the soul of the city isn't in its warehouses. It's in its kitchens, its cradles, its alleys, its lacework, its washing lines. As you loop back toward the main street, the light is shifting again. The sun hangs low, casting every brick and tile in golden relief. A woman with a bundle of firewood nods to you. Another crosses the road with a stack of rushes for the floor, and one more, perhaps the richest of them all, adjusts her pearl earring in the reflection of a window and doesn't notice you at all. They pass like shadows, like roots, like scaffolding hidden beneath painted ceilings. You keep walking, the market noise now behind you, and think, without them, this city would fall apart before the next tide. You step into a side street and immediately almost lose a shoe to something sticky. You don't look too closely. It's best not to, and instead keep moving, ducking your head to avoid a hanging sign shaped like a pair of scissors. It swings slightly in the breeze, creaking on its iron hook. Above it, laundry flaps from a third-story line, a white undershirt snapping like a flag of surrender. Two children scamper past you, barefoot and loud, one carrying a stick and the other a chicken. You decide not to ask questions. Children are everywhere in Amsterdam, more than you'd expect, and all of them seem suspiciously busy. If they're not apprenticing, they're running errands. If not errands, then hauling water, watching siblings, or working in their family's trade. Childhood is a loose concept in the 1600s, more of a transitionary blur between helplessness and labour. You don't get a birthday party. You get your first broom, maybe your first delivery route. If your family's lucky, you get a basic education, maybe some reading and sums. But most learn what they need to know from the street: how to run fast, talk faster, and duck when someone throws a herring head. You pass an open doorway where a boy is standing on a stool, reciting something in Latin to a man you assume is his tutor. The man corrects him with a snap of a wooden pointer against the table. You keep moving. Up ahead, a small group of children sits in a circle beside a candlemaker's stall. They're watching a puppet show, an old glove puppet swaying back and forth while a hidden voice shouts in falsetto. The children laugh at every exaggerated whack and fall, and the puppeteer rattles a tin cup at the end. A few coins clink in. One of the kids turns to you and makes a face. You return it. The girl beside him hurls a pebble at a passing rat. Direct hit. The group erupts in cheers. You pause by a fountain, or what used to be one. Now it's mostly a cracked basin full of rainwater and someone's old wooden shoe. A couple of boys have fashioned a game out of throwing coins at a floating cabbage leaf, cheering when one lands clean. You wonder briefly how many guilders this city loses to children's games every year. Just beyond, you spot a familiar scene: a print shop's back door open to the alley, and a teenage apprentice hauling armfuls of paper. His tunic is ink-stained, his hands blackened, his face so tired it looks like it's sagging off his skull. But he's still upright, still moving. You know the look. He's probably been working since before sunrise. Apprentices don't get days off. They get scraped knuckles, missed meals, and the occasional pat on the back if their master is feeling generous. You follow the paper trail into the shop's front window and glance inside. The master printer is hunched over a press, sleeves rolled to his elbows, sweat dripping from his temple as he adjusts type. Rows of neatly set letters wait in trays, each one reversed, mirrored, a private alphabet only printers can truly read. He's printing broadsheets today, some kind of political notice, judging by the urgency in his scowl. One wrong line and the whole page has to be set again. Back-breaking, meticulous work, and of course, occasionally treasonous, depending on who paid for the text. There's an old argument still bouncing around among scholars. Were apprentices better off in Amsterdam than in other European cities, or just better marketed? The answer, as usual, is, it depends. Amsterdam had laws meant to protect apprentices, formal contracts, set durations, the promise of eventual independence. But how often those rules were actually followed? That's murkier. Some masters were generous, others were tyrants with good shoes. You continue on, boots echoing in a courtyard shaded by high walls. A girl is feeding pigeons from her apron, scattering seeds while her younger brother tries to chase them with a stick. He stumbles, falls, cries, and she sighs like this happens 10 times a day. Probably because it does. She helps him up without a word and hands him one of the seeds. He throws it in the wrong direction proudly. You pass a door marked with chalk, just a symbol, nothing dramatic. A sign for delivery boys that a customer is out or doesn't want to be disturbed. Above the door, someone has carved a crude heart into the brick. You wonder who did it. Lovers, probably. Or bored kids with a knife and too much energy. Either way, it's a little piece of graffiti the city will probably wear forever, like a scar that doesn't bother to heal. Up ahead, a group of apprentices in mismatched clothes are lounging on a stoop, eating bread and laughing in that way only people who are both exhausted and 17 can manage. One of them has a swollen eye, another has a tooth missing. They're probably from the blacksmith or the cooper's shop. You can smell the smoke and iron on them. One nods at you. You nod back. You pause beside a small tailor's workshop and peek through the open shutter. Inside, a boy is threading a needle while his master barks out measurements. The boy fumbles once, twice, and finally gets it on the third try. He glances up and sees you watching. You give him a thumbs up and he flushes with a small smile before returning to work. There's a sense of continuity in these kids, like the city's pulse runs through them. They're the next layer of brick in the wall, whether they want to be or not. You think of all the tools being handed down, the lessons passed quietly from calloused hands to smaller ones. How many trades have already been born today? How many futures started in those cramped, soot-stained shops? A fringe fact. Some children in 1600s Amsterdam actually filed lawsuits against their masters or employers. Legal records exist of apprentices suing for unpaid wages, poor treatment, or being kept past the end of their contract. And sometimes, shockingly, they won. It wasn't common, but it happened. Even then, kids knew their worth, or at least when someone was cheating them. The bells chime the hour, ringing out over rooftops. Somewhere, school has just let out, and you see a gaggle of children sprinting toward the harbour with the kind of energy that only comes from hours of forced Latin. One girl has her slate tucked under her arm like a weapon. Another is clearly trying to lose a sibling on purpose. You watch them go, their laughter fading as they vanish around a corner. The city swallows them back up like breath. You look down at your hands, older now, slower, and remember the weight of a broom, a needle, a stick used to chase rats through the gutters. Childhood here isn't soft, but it's sharp. It cuts you into who you'll become. And somewhere down these alleys, in the shadow of a steeple or behind a smokehouse, another child is picking up a tool for the first time. You smell it before you see it. Hot resin, wood dust, and something sharp like fresh glue. As you turn the corner, the street narrows and darkens, buildings pressing close like curious old men leaning in to hear better. A swinging sign creaks overhead. A carved plane and chisel, well worn, barely painted. You've reached one of the city's quieter miracles, Amsterdam's workshops. The real kind. Not the front room storefronts for the tourists and buyers, but the guts of craft, where things are made slowly, carefully, and with an aching spine. The door is half open, warped from years of steam and foot traffic. You push it gently and step inside. At once, the world outside dims to a murmur. Inside, it's hushed and dense with scent. Pine, beeswax, damp wool, metal filings, and the tang of sweat that clings to the bones of the place. A small stove clinks softly in the corner, and the light that filters in through the greasy windows is golden and thick with sawdust. There are two men working, neither of whom looks up as you enter. One is bent over a workbench, planing a piece of wood until curls of shavings fall to the floor like ribbons. The other is carving a fine detail into the leg of what might be a chair, or a small table, or perhaps something more elaborate. It's hard to tell with the half-finished limbs and panels stacked everywhere like a puzzle mid-solvable. This is a joiner's shop, but it's not just chairs and chests. If you know the right alley, you can find masters who make everything here. Harpsichords, clocks, carved altarpieces, even custom prosthetics. You glance to one corner and see a delicate cabinet with inlaid ivory, clearly commissioned by someone with more money than taste. The tools hang from hooks like surgical instruments, their wooden handles smoothed by generations. Everything in this room has weight, memory, and an edge that cuts both wood and time. A young apprentice, 15, maybe 16, glances up from the back of the room. He nods, respectful but tired, with hands stained the colour of walnut oil. His apron is too big, his shoulders too small, but he moves with a kind of precision that tells you this boy has spent more time holding a chisel than a pen. He returns to polishing a tiny drawer face, rubbing it with a cloth until it gleams like glass. You step softly, not wanting to interrupt. There's a reverence here you don't find elsewhere in the city. The church might tell you what to believe, the market tells you what to eat. But the workshop, it tells you what lasts. These men build the things that survive after the body fails. A well-made table can outlive 3 generations. A cabinet like that one might hold secrets longer than anyone meant it to. The joiner finally looks up and gives you a brief nod. His face is a weather map of frowns and concentration lines. You know better than to ask questions until the mallet is down, which he obliges after a moment. "Drawers sticking," he mutters by way of hello. "Humidity." You nod. Everything here is damp. Air, walls, even thought. He squints toward the piece you're admiring. For a merchant's wife. Wants something classical. I told her we're not in Rome. His dry sarcasm is part of the furniture now. You laugh softly, careful not to sound like you're enjoying it too much. He gestures toward a shelf near the back, where a few completed pieces sit like students waiting for a report card. One chest has carvings of tulips and birds, another, more subtle, is plain but flawlessly constructed. The drawers slide without a sound. You run your fingers along the edge, smooth as anything you've ever touched. He shrugs. That one's going to Antwerp. Some linen baron wants it for his daughter's dowry. Probably fill it with scented shirts and regrets. The apprentice snorts from the back. The joiner doesn't smile, but there's a flicker of amusement in his eye. You don't ask what it costs. You know the answer is too much, even for a city that deals in gold and cinnamon. A fringe fact you might not expect. Amsterdam in the 1600s was one of Europe's leaders in luxury furniture and instrument production. Cabinet makers, joiners, and instrument builders were respected members of guilds, with commissions coming from across the continent. Some pieces were so finely crafted that scholars today still argue over who made them. A few even had hidden compartments designed to hold illicit documents or money. Art, yes, but also espionage. As you move toward the door, the apprentice brings over a block of wood and shows it to the joiner. Something's wrong with the grain, or maybe the cut. They mutter about angles and knots, hands tracing the lines like priests reading scripture. You slip out quietly, not wanting to disturb the flow of problem-solving that smells like glue and genius. Back outside, the light feels too bright, the noise too loud. Your ears take a moment to adjust to the clatter of hooves and the shouting of a cooper down the street. The smell of pitch and tar floats by from another shop where barrels are being sealed. Further along, someone's hammering horseshoes, and you swear you hear a lute being tuned in a room above a shop selling sheet music. The whole street sings a different note now. You pass a glazier's stall, where a man is cutting lead strips for window frames. Shards of coloured glass scatter across the bench like hard candy, and you can't help but stop and stare at a piece of deep blue that catches the sun just right. The glazier notices and raises an eyebrow. "Church window," he says. "Big one." You don't ask where. It's not polite to pry, especially not if the commission's secret. Further down, a man sits outside his workshop carving delicate shapes into ivory. Legal? Questionable. Beautiful. Absolutely. You see the curled ear of a comb, the smooth handle of a knife, the beginnings of a chess piece. He's squinting in the sunlight, hands still as death. He doesn't look up, and you don't interrupt. You're surrounded by the hum of skilled hands. This is Amsterdam beneath the gold leaf, the place where the wealth is turned into wood, glass and metal, where artistry and sweat are fused in every joint, every polish, every turn of a screw. The city may trade in spices, but it breathes through these shops. And as you step into the next alley, you can still hear the rasp of a file and the whisper of shavings falling to the floor. Behind every fancy parlour or velvet-curtained salon is a back room like this, dark, damp, and full of tools that will outlive the men who use them. The sound of voices ahead pulls you out of the rhythm of clinking tools and into something sharper, more brittle. The street opens into a small square, framed by a church, a bakery, and a row of tightly packed houses with shuttered windows. You stop just short of the church steps, drawn by a pair of men in heavy wool cloaks, arguing beneath the stone archway. They speak in low voices, sharp consonants cutting through the air like knives. You catch the words heretic and Jesuit and know instantly, this is one of those conversations. Amsterdam may be tolerant, but it is not peaceful, not when it comes to faith. Officially, the Dutch Republic is Calvinist, reformed, stern, structured, stripped of saints and relics and any decoration that smells too much like Rome. But Amsterdam? This city has always been an exception. A merchant city. A refuge city. Which means, tucked behind the brick and beneath the politeness, it is a stew of religions, many of them simmering too close to a boil. You turn slightly and glance up at the church behind the men. It's austere, grey stone with little ornament, a plain steeple, and a door that looks like it weighs more than most livestock. The inside, you know, will be just as bare. Whitewashed walls, a pulpit like a ship's bow, maybe a few carved wooden panels if the elders are feeling generous. You've been in one before. The air feels thinner there, like even God is expected to keep his voice down. But across the city, hidden behind innocent doors and accessed through kitchen stairwells, are the other churches, the secret ones. Schuilkerken, clandestine chapels, where Catholics still light candles and whisper Latin prayers, where Jews from Portugal gather behind barred windows, and where dissenting Protestants meet quietly, never quite sure which neighbour might report them for having the wrong version of the same God. You wander from the square, drifting down a quieter street. Here, religion hums beneath everything. You can see it in the architecture, who built what and when. This door is newer than its frame. That cross carved into stone has been scrubbed almost smooth. A symbol scratched into the side of a well might mean blessing, or it might just be a mason's mark. Nobody talks about it openly, but everyone knows who attends the official churches and who disappears into unmarked buildings on Sundays. In a windowsill up ahead, someone has placed a statue of the Virgin Mary between two pots of rosemary. It's tiny, half hidden, and almost certainly illegal. You glance around, but no one seems to care. Or maybe they care too much to say anything. A few doors down, a group of schoolboys are filing out of a small unmarked building. They're dressed neatly, collars stiff, books tucked under their arms. The building, you know, is a clandestine Catholic school. Technically illegal, technically tolerated. Their teacher, a soft-spoken man with a thin beard and a limp, nods at you as he follows them out. You nod back. The unspoken agreement here is clear. Say nothing, and the world keeps turning. Fringe fact. By the mid-1600s, it was common knowledge that Catholic house churches operated in Amsterdam, often disguised as upper floors of regular houses. The city government took a don't ask, don't tell approach, as long as the churches stayed discreet and didn't try to convert anyone. A clever loophole in a city that runs more on trade than dogma. You pass a doorway where a Hebrew letter is carved subtly into the lintel. The Sephardic Jewish community here, mostly refugees from Spain and Portugal, has built a quiet empire of trade and scholarship. They're not citizens, not technically allowed in the guilds and barred from certain professions, but they've carved out their space anyway. They sponsor synagogues and publish books, run spice shops and apothecaries. If you know the right street, you can buy the best cinnamon in the city from a man who speaks 5 languages and can quote both Torah and tax law in his sleep. The Reformation may have fractured Europe, but in Amsterdam the pieces keep living side by side, barely held together with social glue and mutual suspicion. You hear it in the whispers, in the quiet refusals, in the way someone hesitates before telling you which church they attend. That pause tells you more than the answer. You pass a tavern with an open window, where 2 men are in hushed conversation over mugs of beer. One wears a black cloak with silver trim, the sort favoured by city officials. The other is dressed like a merchant, but the chain around his neck suggests something more clerical. They're discussing a pamphlet. You hear the words doctrine and heresy and something that sounds like Leiden. You move along. You've heard this play before. Different actors, same tragedy. Here's something you overheard once and never forgot. The safest religion in Amsterdam is the one you practice in silence. You think about that as you turn onto a street known for its printers. These are the men who publish books in multiple languages, for multiple audiences, often under false names or empty addresses. Some pamphlets are philosophical, others are venomous, all of them dangerous in the wrong hands. One print shop in particular has its shutters closed and door bolted, but you see a man pass a slip of paper through a crack in the frame. A coin follows. Moments later, a package is handed back. A book, clearly. Its title hidden under brown paper. You look away, then back. The man is gone. You walk on, pausing briefly at the foot of an alley that smells like wet stone and secrets. You can see a light flickering in an upstairs window, candlelight, and hear the muffled sound of singing. Too soft to make out, too rhythmic to be random. Someone is holding service. You keep your distance. You listen for a moment, then you walk away. The city is like that. Half confession, half denial. You never quite know what someone believes until you see what they risk for it. And in Amsterdam, belief is a private currency. Spend it wrong, and you lose more than money. As you turn back toward the busier streets, a breeze picks up, carrying the mixed scent of bread, smoke, and something faintly floral, perhaps incense from a hidden altar. The wind moves quickly through the alleys, like a messenger with somewhere urgent to be. You adjust your cloak and keep walking, careful not to step on the chalk symbol drawn near a doorway. A protective mark, a warning, a prayer. No one really says, but everyone steps around it, just the same. The church bells ring out again, this time heavier, slower. The kind of tone that makes your stomach perk up like it's been trained. Midday. Time to eat. Not a feast, mind you. Lunch in Amsterdam isn't about indulgence. It's about survival, just enough to keep the day going and your hands steady for whatever's next. You adjust the weight of your cloak and follow the crowd of tradesmen drifting toward one of the older brick buildings near the canal, the Guildhall. Every profession worth its salt has a guild, and this one, just off the single, is for the whalers, chandlers, and a few lesser sea-related trades that don't quite deserve their own buildings. The Guildhall's facade is ornate, with a stone carving of a whale, a rope coil, and two very serious-looking angels who, honestly, have no business being involved in the price of whale oil. The door swings open as you approach, and the warm smell of roasted onions, stale beer, and wet wool rolls out to greet you like an old uncle. Inside, the hall is dim, lit mostly by tall windows smudged with soot and condensation. Long wooden tables stretch across the floor, already half filled with men in heavy coats, breeches and shoes that leave muddy trails behind them. The atmosphere is loud, peppered with laughter, arguments, and the scrape of knives against wooden plates. You claim a spot near the end of one table, nodding at the faces around you. A couple of them you've seen before, maybe in the market, maybe in a line at the tax office, a few you don't recognise at all. Lunch is brought out in big wooden bowls, pickled turnips, salted beef, a wedge of rye bread, and the ever-present beer. It's not cold, but it's stronger than water, and nobody's complaining. You dig in, eating with the rhythm of someone who knows better than to pause too long. Talking comes after, or better yet, not at all. A large man across from you slams his mug down and announces the rising price of whale oil like it's a personal betrayal. 4 stuvers a keg, he growls, and they're watering it down now, I swear by it. You light a lamp and it flickers like a scared nun. This is greeted by general groaning and a few muttered prayers to the better days of Greenland expeditions. Someone makes a crack about the blubber being half rat by now. Someone else laughs too hard at that. You chew slowly and listen. The conversation drifts from prices to politics, then inevitably to ships. Always ships. The heart of the city doesn't beat in its churches or its counting houses, it beats in the harbour. They talk about weather near the Azores, about a storm that broke a mast off the coast of Lisbon, about a cargo of spices that never made it past the Cape. Everyone seems to know someone who's lost someone. That's just the cost of doing business with the sea. You offer a few words when asked, mostly to confirm you've heard the same about the oil. You have, though it's also entirely possible no one's checked the barrel since last winter. One man beside you leans in to tell you about a rumour, that a whale twice the size of a house was spotted near Iceland, and the captain who saw it swore it had a scar that looked like a human face. You raise an eyebrow. He swears on his mother's grave. You nod politely and return to your bread. Fringe fact, Amsterdam's economy was tied so tightly to whaling in the 1600s that some guilds required members to provide barrels of oil for city use, lighting lamps, preserving wood, waterproofing ropes. Whale oil lit the homes of the elite and greased the hinges of trade. There were even paintings commissioned to celebrate successful whaling voyages, though most of them made the whales look oddly polite about being killed. The Guildhall has rules, unwritten and otherwise. Don't start a fight unless you can finish it before the steward gets involved. Don't discuss religion unless you're trying to ruin the meal. And don't, under any circumstances, insult someone's ship. You once saw a man thrown into the canal over a casual remark about someone's rigging. He surfaced with fish in his coat pocket, and an expression that suggested he'd do it again, given the chance. The steward wanders by now, a small balding man with the permanent look of someone who's seen too much. He eyes your plate, nods approvingly at your clean fork and offers a scrap of gossip. City council's arguing about night patrol budgets again. Means more crime this winter. Watch your boots. You nod. He moves on. You drain your mug and catch a snatch of conversation from the next table. Something about a new tax on imports from the Danish ports. More groaning. Someone mutters that the taxman will start charging for rain next. You chuckle into your bread. As the meal winds down, a man 2 seats down unrolls a parchment and begins sketching something. A rough map of a new shipping route, or so he claims. Someone leans in. A wager is made. The table quiets for a moment, pencils scratching, calculations murmured under breath. It won't lead to anything official, but for now it matters. And sometimes that's enough. You wipe your hands on your coat and stand. Most others are lingering, easing back into the day with slow drinks and louder talk. But your legs are restless, and the afternoon is slipping away. You nod to the men near you, a shared look of solidarity among people who've seen too many cargo ledgers and not enough sunsets. Back outside, the light is sharp, bouncing off the canal in fractured gold. The sky's turned that pale blue that feels like a trick, pretty, but hiding something. A cold wind cuts down the street like it's late for an appointment. You pull your collar up and start walking, passing more guild halls, more shops, more men half dreaming of voyages they'll never take and fortunes they'll never hold. And above them all, rising just above the rooftops, the weather vane on the Westerkirk spins slowly, trying to decide which way the city will turn next. You drift west with a stomach full of salted meat and a slight beer buzz clinging to your thoughts like fog. It's a good kind of tired, the kind that warms your limbs just enough to make you walk slower and notice things, like the way the late afternoon sun hits the canal and turns it molten gold for a breath or two, like the uneven bricks of the house walls, red, brown, some patched with plaster, all slightly bowed like the buildings are trying to shake hands above the street. The shadows are stretching now. The city's shape is changing again. You know where you're headed, though you pretend you don't. You pass through a quieter lane and make a right at the tavern with the sign, shaped like a duck missing one wing. Past the bakery, past the bookseller with the warped shutters, until you spot the window. You always know it by the light. It spills out onto the cobblestones like melted butter, soft and steady, even in the fading day. You knock once, twice. A pause, then the door creaks open. Inside, it's silent. Not the absence of noise kind of silence, but a held breath kind. The air smells of linseed oil, chalk and something else you can never name. Maybe dried flowers or ink. The room is small and warm, cluttered in that particular way that only genius, or madness, allows. A canvas leans against one wall, half finished, a woman's face emerging from the brushstrokes like she's waking up from a long dream. Her eyes are too sharp for sleep, though. She's watching. The painter doesn't turn as you step in. He's standing at an easel, hand poised in the air, brush held like a dagger. You don't say anything. You never do. Talking breaks it. He dips the brush into a bit of ochre and adds a line. No, a shadow, just beneath the curve of a jug on the table in front of him. Not the jug in the painting, the real one. It's sitting on a cloth, lit by a single window high above, the light slanting down in perfect geometry. You know better than to move too close. Everything is arranged. If you breathe too loud, the whole composition might collapse. This is what Amsterdam does that no other city does quite the same. It lets artists disappear into the ordinary, into quiet domestic scenes. A woman pouring milk, a man writing a letter, a child staring out a window. They become sacred by stillness, by patience. And the painter? He becomes invisible. A conduit, a ghost with a brush. You step back slightly, careful not to knock into a stack of wooden panels leaning against the wall. Each one holds a study. Eyes, hands, fabric folds, a single pair. You wonder how long he's been working on this one. Days? Weeks? Maybe longer? Time bends in these rooms. You look at the jug again, then at the painted jug, then back. You can't tell which is more real. He finally speaks, not turning, his voice hoarse and quiet. The light shifted yesterday. Had to start over. You nod. He still doesn't look at you. She moved. Just her foot, but it broke the line. That line was perfect. You glance toward the corner where the model sits. She's wrapped in a shawl now, the pose long abandoned, sipping tea with a sleepy gaze. She doesn't mind the obsession. Or maybe she does, but she's paid enough not to argue. Or maybe she's fallen in love with the silence. You can't tell. Her eyes are unreadable. The painter steps back from the canvas and rubs his brow with the back of his wrist. It's wrong, he says flatly. It's always wrong. You want to tell him it's not. That what he's doing is sorcery in slow motion. But you don't. That would ruin it. Fringe fact, many Dutch Golden Age painters weren't celebrities in their own lifetimes. Some died in debt, others were modestly successful, known only to their patrons, and some, like Vermeer, left behind a small body of work that wouldn't be appreciated until centuries later, when entire museums would be built just to stand quietly in front of a girl with a pearl earring. You wonder what this man's name will mean 100 years from now, or if it will mean anything at all. He picks up another brush, thinner, finer, and leans in again, breathing in shallow bursts. You know he's about to disappear for another hour, maybe more. You shift slightly toward a small table near the back of the room, where a few sketches are stacked beside an open book of anatomical drawings. Beside it, a note from a patron, fussy and full of corrections. You recognise the seal, a merchant with too much coin and too little vision. The painter will ignore most of it, but he'll still paint the man's daughter exactly how the man asks. That's how rent gets paid. You study one sketch, a girl's hand resting on a book, soft and delicate, but with knuckles so precisely drawn they feel warm to the touch. You glance toward the window. The light is fading now, sliding off the floor in long fingers. The painter steps back again, stares at the canvas, then at the jug, then at the floor. "It was there for a second," he murmurs. "The light, I mean, it was right, and then it wasn't." You nod because you understand, or you pretend you do. In this room it doesn't matter. Reality is negotiable. Light is a language only some people speak fluently. Everyone else just squints. He turns suddenly and stares at you like he's only just noticed you came in. "There's bread," he says, gesturing vaguely to a plate. You nod and take a piece. It's stale but warm from the fire. You eat in silence, listening to the scratch of bristles and the soft creak of the easel. You watch the jug. You look at the woman. You glance again at the canvas. The world rearranges itself in quiet degrees. Eventually he mutters something about needing new pigments. He's running low on lapis. You almost laugh. Of course he is. Lapis is crushed gemstone. It costs more than most houses, but he'll find a way. He always does. Patrons want the blue sky, the virgin's robe, the illusion of endless depth. And painters sell illusion by the inch. You step out quietly as he begins muttering to himself, brush dancing again over the canvas. Outside, the wind has shifted. The shadows are long now, stretching across the canal like they're trying to hold the city still. You walk on, and behind you, the window glows like an ember in the fading day. You're halfway down the canal when you see it. The familiar red X painted in quick, uneven strokes across a door just ahead. You slow down without realising, boots crunching slightly on the frost-bitten edge of the cobblestones. There's a stillness around that house, like the city has taken a step back and agreed not to breathe too loud. Even the birds seem to give it a wider berth. The door is closed, the shutters are drawn, the red paint is still wet. You've seen this before. Too many times and never enough warning. It means someone inside is sick. Not sprained ankle sick, not too much ale sick. The other kind. The kind that sends the neighbours whispering and the children indoors. The kind that makes your chest tighten just walking past the building. You cross to the other side of the canal without thinking. Plague is a word the city never quite forgets, even when it's not actively spreading. It hides in the walls, in the water, in the memory of everyone over the age of 10. The 1600s have already seen waves of it. Some small, some catastrophic. Whole streets emptied, families gone in days. The plague doesn't knock politely. It kicks the door in and leaves you begging for air. And when it comes fast. You pause near a bridge and glance back. There's a single candle burning in the upstairs window. Maybe they're hoping for mercy. Maybe they're just making sure someone knows they're still alive. Down the block, a city official is painting another X, muttering to himself as he moves from one house to the next. He's wearing a scarf over his mouth and gloves too fine for this kind of work. Someone shouts at him from a window. He ignores it. You can't exactly argue with protocol, though people will try. Every time the city tightens its rules, someone tries to cheat death with loopholes. Doesn't usually work. You duck into a nearby alley, trying to shake off the chill that's crept down your spine. It's not just the cold air. It's that specific kind of fear, the kind you can't name, because naming it feels like inviting it inside. You wrap your cloak tighter and keep moving. You need to breathe something besides dread. Unfortunately, the alley only offers you the scent of wet brick, burnt cabbage, and something else. something worse. You follow your nose and find yourself near a communal privy, a low stone structure shared by the surrounding houses. There's a line of buckets waiting to be emptied, their contents covered by wooden lids that try to help but fail on a molecular level. You can smell it from yards away, acidic, human, and immediate. A man in a leather apron is hauling one of the buckets toward the canal, grumbling under his breath. You don't envy him. You also don't ask questions. The less you think about where the waste goes, the easier it is to drink your beer. This is the other side of Amsterdam, the not-so-golden part of the Golden Age. The part where toilets are luxuries, where water flows but rarely clean, where the canals that bring wealth also bring disease. Most houses have their own privies if they're lucky, but the shared ones, like this, are for the rest of the city. Servants, labourers, immigrants, the barely holding-ons. You've been here before, you'll probably be here again. As you move past, your boot slips on something slick. You curse and steady yourself, pretending you didn't just almost fall into something you'd rather not describe. Nearby, a rat the size of a loaf of bread scurries along the edge of the gutter. It stops, stares at you like it's daring you to comment, then vanishes into a crack in the wall. You keep moving. A fringe fact for you. Amsterdam's 17th century sanitation was, by modern standards, horrifying. Most waste was dumped directly into the canals, which were also the main source of water for washing, and even, at times, drinking. City ordinances existed to control where and when waste could be thrown out, but they were rarely enforced. One such rule stated that household chamber pots could only be emptied after the 9th bell, which meant around 9 p.m. Of course, if someone's child had a stomach problem at noon, all bets were off. You step out of the alley and back onto a wider street, grateful for the fresh air such as it is. A baker's cart is rolling by, and for a blessed moment the smell of warm bread covers everything else. You nod to the boy pushing it. He nods back, cheeks pink from the cold, sleeves rolled to his elbows. Probably been up since before dawn kneading dough while his older brother tended the oven. You wonder how they wash up at the end of the day, then again maybe it's better not to. Up ahead, a woman is airing out linens from her second-story window, snapping them sharply in the breeze like she's trying to beat sickness out of the fabric. Below, a bucket of soapy water sits ready, steam rising from its surface. Soap's expensive, not everyone bothers. But when plague rumours begin, people find their cleanliness fast. Whether it helps or not is a different question. Another window opens and someone dumps what you hope is just laundry water into the street below. It splashes near your boots. You jump sideways. Close call. You stop at a street corner where a small chapel once stood, burned down years ago in a fire no one talks about. The lot is empty now, weeds pushing through the stone foundation. A few children are playing there, using old beams as balance bars and pretending to fight monsters. One of them coughs, hard. You try not to flinch. There's a tension in the air, subtle but building. The red X's haven't gone unnoticed. You hear it in the shift of voices, the way people edge further apart as they pass. You see it in the way shopkeepers lean out their doors and watch, waiting for news, waiting for an order from the council, waiting for someone to admit this could be another wave. And of course, there's no real cure. Not for the plague, not for the damp, not for the slow rot that creeps into the foundations of every wooden house in this city. People try, of course. They light incense. They hang herbs in their windows. They burn sulphur and carry sachets of vinegar-soaked cloth. None of it really works, but it gives them something to do, which matters more than anyone admits. You turn toward home, or what counts as home today, just as the church bell chimes again. The sound bounces down the canal like a warning. You glance back once more at the door with the red X. Still closed. Still silent. You walk faster, heart drumming a quiet rhythm to match the steps of the city. The hush of fear, the squelch of something unidentifiable under your heel. You don't mean to end up in the tavern, honestly. It just sort of happens. One moment you're walking, boots still damp from canal mist and plague-adjacent gutters, and the next, your hand is on the door handle of De Drievaarten, the Three Barrels, a squat, soot-darkened building wedged between a spice merchant and a candlemaker with perpetually grumpy eyebrows. The tavern door sticks like it always does, and you have to give it a good shoulder to get inside. It groans open with the sound of damp wood complaining about its life choices. Inside, the atmosphere hits you like a blanket soaked in ale and secrets. It's dark, warm, and loud, the way any self-respecting tavern should be. Light comes from iron sconces and a few hanging oil lamps that sway slightly with every footstep. The floor is sticky in places and suspiciously soft in others. The ceiling is low enough that tall men have to duck to avoid hanging herbs, or duck even lower to avoid someone's elbow. The barkeep is exactly where he always is, behind the counter, polishing a mug that hasn't been cleaned since the last queen was crowned. His moustache twitches when he sees you. You give a nod. He nods back. That's enough conversation for now. You slide onto a bench along the wall and take stock of the room. A group of sailors are crowded around a barrel laughing too loudly. One of them has a fresh bandage around his arm and keeps thumping the table like he's trying to make a point no one's asking for. In the corner, two older women are drinking something cloudy and whispering with the intensity of people passing judgment across generations. Between them is a tiny pewter flask with a symbol scratched into it that you don't recognise and probably aren't supposed to. You're just about to settle in when the barkeep slides over a mug. You didn't ask for it, but he knows. You take a sip. It's bitter, warm, and absolutely perfect. A second later, a man flops down onto the bench beside you. He's got a hat that's more hole than hat and a smell like he's been sleeping in a spice cart. Cardamom, cloves, and a faint note of something burnt. You nod at him. He grins. "Did you hear about Willem?" he asks. You don't even need to clarify which Willem. There are 8, but only one is in the kind of trouble people whisper about. You raise your eyebrows. He leans closer, lowering his voice like he's about to reveal the location of buried treasure. 3 houses up from the Uderzides. Suddenly flush. Bought his wife a velvet bodice and his son a Latin tutor. Everyone's pretending not to notice. You sip your beer. He continues. Word is he's harbouring a priest. You try not to react. That's serious, even in Amsterdam. The city turns a blind eye to a lot of things, especially if you're discreet, but sheltering a Catholic priest under your roof? That's playing theological roulette with your livelihood. Then again, if it's true, it explains the money. Some families still pay dearly for private mass, and some priests, they're more connected than they seem. The man next to you winks. Or maybe he's just trading pepper behind the guild's back, but where's the fun in that? Gossip is the true currency in Amsterdam, and taverns are the bank. You could find out more about your neighbours here in one drink than you could living next to them for 10 years. Affairs, debts, conversions, smuggling, black market tulips, bad poetry. Everything ends up in a tavern eventually. You just have to be there at the right time. You glance over to the fireplace where a man with ink-stained fingers is nursing a cup of something that looks more like boiled moss than beer. He's muttering to himself and scratching notes on a slip of paper. A pamphleteer, probably. The city's full of them. Half-broke men writing under fake names, publishing polemics and scathing editorials about the government, religion, or the scandal of a neighbour's oddly short petticoat. Some are brilliant, some are delusional, all of them are dangerous in their own way. Fringe fact. In 17th century Amsterdam, gossip could actually become evidence. In some court cases, rumours repeated often enough by respectable citizens could be entered into the legal record. Which means, if enough people saw you kissing someone suspicious or pouring a bucket out your window at the wrong hour, it might just become fact, officially. Behind you, a lute player strikes up a tune, soft and meandering. It's not a happy song, but it's not mournful either. Just one of those wandering melodies that matches the flicker of lamplight and the lull of beer-heavy conversation. Someone starts singing along off-key. No one tells him to stop. A serving girl weaves through the room, her apron stained, hair tied back in a red cloth. She carries a tray with 2 bowls of stew and a mug balanced precariously on the edge. She dodges a dog, a drunk, and a chair leg in the same step. You suspect she could win a war if she were given a sword and 5 minutes of warning. Another man enters the tavern, his cloak soaked from the drizzle that's just started outside. He pauses in the doorway, scanning the room. His eyes land on you for half a second before moving on. You get the feeling you were just sized up, categorised and filed away. You don't recognise him, but something about the way he moves says he's not here for drink or gossip. Probably a courier. Or worse, an informant. He slips into a seat near the window and says nothing. Your drinking companion is still talking, now about a neighbour's daughter who was caught sneaking out at midnight with a basket of pears and a grin like she'd just gotten away with something. You listen with one ear while watching the newcomer. He hasn't ordered anything. Just sitting there, dry eyes behind wet lashes, waiting for something to happen. The door opens again, and for a brief moment the tavern is flooded with cold air and the sound of hooves on stone. Another man enters, older, heavier, with rings on fingers and a cloak trimmed in fur. Definitely guild money. He doesn't even glance around, just walks straight to the man by the window and leans down to speak. You don't hear what's said, but you see something change in the courier's face. Tension, decision, agreement. The older man presses a small pouch into his hand and walks back out. The courier stays seated. Just like that, the tavern's back to normal. You finish your drink slowly, the warmth of it spreading through your chest like a soft flame. Outside, the drizzle's picked up. You can hear it pattering against the shutters. The conversation in the room rolls on, stories traded, names dropped, rumours born. You rise, nod to the barkeep, and push through the heavy door again. The city is cooler now, the kind of cold that seeps through your boots and up your legs, like it has something to prove. Behind you, De Driefatten returns to its business of being the safest place to say the most dangerous things. The rain isn't heavy, just steady. A curtain of mist so fine it clings to your eyelashes and soaks through your cloak without ever actually dripping. You pull the fabric tighter around your shoulders and make your way down a street that smells like oil, rope, and metal. You're close to the water now. Not the polite canals with swans and sunlit bridges, but the real edge of the city, the warehouses, the docks, the mouth of Amsterdam's empire. To your left, crates are being unloaded from a flat barge by men in thick coats with arms like barrels. They work in near silence, moving with the practiced rhythm of people who know exactly how far they can push their backs before something gives out. The crates are stamped with symbols you don't recognise. Some are Dutch, but others look Portuguese, or maybe Javanese. You catch the scent of cinnamon as one lid is pried open. Real cinnamon. Sharp, sweet, and intoxicating. You pause to watch as one of the men pulls a scroll of parchment from inside a crate. An inventory list, sealed with wax and scrawled in a looping hand. He hands it to a man in a black cloak and white gloves, who squints at it as if he's just been handed a confession. You recognise the cloak. VOC, the Dutch East India Company. This isn't just any shipment, it's their shipment. Founded in 1602, the VOC is less a company and more a state within a state. It prints its own money, maintains its own armies, negotiates with kings, and crushes anyone who threatens its profit margins. In Amsterdam, the VOC is a god in velvet. Their offices span entire blocks. Their warehouses are bursting with the stolen scents of a dozen nations, and every ounce of pepper and porcelain has blood soaked into it somewhere along the route. You walk past rows of spice crates, each one labelled and sealed with care. Pepper from Sumatra, nutmeg from the Banda Islands, mace, cloves, turmeric, even a handful of coffee beans nestled in a jar like holy relics. Most of these won't make it to normal households. They'll go to the rich, to the sugar barons and velvet widows, the guild heads and the merchant kings. A pinch of nutmeg could buy a whole goose. A bottle of cinnamon oil could pay off a dockworker's debt. This isn't seasoning, it's currency. The smell here is overwhelming. Your nose catches the sweet rot of unripe fruit, the sharp vinegar of spilled wine, and the dark funk of mouldy sugarcane. Sugar, after all, is never clean. Behind one warehouse, workers are hosing down a floor stained dark with syrup and something worse. A rat scurries past, dragging a chunk of dried fig bigger than its head. You try not to step in anything you can't identify. You pass a side alley stacked with barrels. One is broken open, salted fish packed so tightly together they look fused. Another barrel is labelled India cotton, but the fabric inside is rough, stained, and clearly a lower grade than advertised. Not that anyone here will complain. These goods will be repackaged, marked up, and sold to people too far removed from the source to know better. Amsterdam isn't just a city of trade, it's a city of illusion. You step into the shadow of one of the tallest warehouses, its wooden beams groaning in the wind. A long ramp leads up into the interior, where workers are cataloguing a shipment of porcelain. Blue and white, delicate as eggshells, each piece wrapped in straw and packed in crates thick enough to survive a shipwreck. You peek inside and spot a teapot painted with a crane, its eye so detailed it almost winks. The man doing the inventory glances at you and quickly shuts the crate. A few steps down, a woman sits on a stool with a ledger in her lap. Her ink-stained fingers flip pages as she barks numbers to a clerk nearby. She doesn't look up, and no one questions her authority. She's a boekhoudster, a female bookkeeper. Not common, but not rare either. She could be the widow of a merchant or just someone too good with numbers to ignore. Either way, the crates answer to her. A fringe fact. Women in the Dutch Republic could, and often did, run businesses, especially widows who inherited their husbands' trades. The VOC itself had unofficial female investors, many of them wealthier than their male counterparts. One 17th century woman, Maria van der Does, managed a trade firm so efficiently her ledgers became the model for others. The patriarchy still tried, of course, but in the ledger world, profit tends to speak louder than gender. You pass another loading area where a cart is being filled with sacks of nutmeg. The smell makes your throat tighten. It's too much, too concentrated. A dock worker nearby sneezes violently and drops a sack. The foreman yells. The man bends down, coughing, and mutters something about how he'd rather smell fish guts than this exotic poison again. You agree with him? A little? There's something unsettling about it all. The way these treasures arrive from half a world away and are immediately turned into product. Labelled, priced, moved. What once grew in volcanic soil under monsoon skies is now just a number in a ledger, a scent in someone's parlour, or a spice sprinkled on a meat pie that costs more than your week's rent. And yet, the city lives on this. Amsterdam's greatness, its cathedrals, its canals, its art, is funded by this constant grinding flow of goods. Even as you breathe in the spice, you can't ignore the cost. Not just in coin, but in lives. Sailors lost at sea, labourers crushed under crates, people in far-off islands uprooted, enslaved, or simply erased, all for the smell now coating your sleeves. You move away from the docks, boots crunching on broken straw and spilled beans. The wind carries the scent inland, wrapping around chimney smoke and canal fog. Somewhere, a church bell rings again. You lose track of which one. They blur together here. You look down and realise your boots are stained orange-red, probably from a broken turmeric barrel. You scrape one heel on the edge of a curb and keep walking. The scent follows you. In Amsterdam, it always does. The city feels different when dusk rolls in. Not quieter. Amsterdam is never truly quiet, but more contained, as if everything's drawn just a little closer to itself. The wind softens. The smells shift from fish and sweat to smoke and roast meat, and the canals begin to glow, catching the last of the light and stretching it out like a painter's brushstroke. The reflection of gables and chimneys ripple in the water, flickering and tilting as boats drift lazily beneath the bridges. The sky overhead is a mix of ash and lavender, with the first stars beginning to push their way through the haze. You stop at a corner near a bridge and look up. The oil lamps are being lit. One by one they sputter to life, a flame at the end of each metal hook reaching out from the buildings like tiny sentinels. The lamplighter, an older man with a long pole and a wide-brimmed hat, moves with slow precision, lighting each flame and then stepping back to check his work. You watch him for a while. He doesn't notice. Or if he does, he's long since stopped caring who's watching. The city looks soft now, but don't be fooled. Nightfall just means the gears shift. The merchants are finishing their ledgers, locking their chests and blowing out their candles. The markets are closing, stalls covered, barrels rolled back into storage. The fishmongers have scrubbed their tables, and the last of the water trickles down the gutters in thin, smelly streams. But elsewhere, other parts of the city are just waking up. You pass a group of young men gathering outside a tavern, laughing too loudly and bumping into each other with the casual aggression of people too drunk to notice or care. A dog barks from inside. Someone shouts. A mug hits the ground and shatters. No one pauses. You keep walking. Further down the canal, a boat glides past, flat-bottomed, barely making a sound. Inside, a couple sits under a canopy, faces lit by the soft glow of a lantern swinging gently from the mast. One of them leans forward, gesturing at something in the distance. A date, maybe, or a business meeting with good lighting. It's hard to tell. The boatman doesn't speak, just steers. You reach the Jordan neighbourhood as the last light fades. It's less polished here, more lived in. The buildings lean a little more, and the bricks are soot-darkened and stained with centuries of weather and effort. But it's beautiful, in a scrappy, forgiving kind of way. Someone's playing a lute in a nearby window, the notes warm and uneven. A child laughs from somewhere above, and a curtain flutters as a candle is snuffed out. This is when the city feels most alive, between day and night, when everything's shifting and nothing's decided. You glance at your reflection in the canal and see it shimmer, broken by the current. You've aged since morning. Or maybe it just feels that way. A man walks past you carrying a lantern in one hand and a goose under the other arm. The goose honks once and then falls silent. Neither of them seem in a rush. You wonder where they're going. A cookhouse, a late trade, or maybe the goose is just company. Stranger things have happened in this city. Fringe fact: Amsterdam had ordinances limiting nighttime travel by boat without a lantern, and fines were issued for wandering after dark without proper purpose. Of course, what counted as a proper purpose was flexible. Visiting a sick aunt? Fine. Visiting a sick mistress? Still fine if you tip the right watchman. You make your way toward a familiar bridge, one of the lower ones where the arches curve just enough to make you duck when passing under by boat. From here, you can see the row houses lit from within, tiny windows glowing like fireflies. Some shutters are open, revealing slices of domestic life. A man writing by candlelight, a woman mending, 2 children fighting over a wooden toy, a cat doing absolutely nothing. The street beneath your feet is slick now, not with rain, but with condensation. The stones sweat at night, leaking the day back out. You tread carefully, past doorsteps freshly swept and stoops decorated with sprigs of wintergreen or rosemary. Small gestures of charm or protection, depending on who you ask. You glance up and see a woman lighting a lantern in her window. She holds the match delicately, waiting for the wick to catch. Her silhouette flickers in the glow, and for a moment she looks like a painting. Then the curtain falls and the spell breaks. You pass by a bakery, closed for hours now, but the scent of roasted grain and sugar lingers like a memory. The air is cooler here, and quieter. You can hear your own footsteps, the scrape of leather on stone, the rustle of your cloak, the clink of a distant bell, maybe from a ship docked nearby or a church calling the faithful to their last prayers of the day. One thing's for certain, Amsterdam never fully sleeps. It dozes maybe, turns its head and sighs, but always, somewhere, something is happening. A birth, a theft, a whispered promise over wine. You can feel it, underfoot, in the wind, in the shifting glimmer of the water as you cross another bridge. You pause again, watching the lamplight dance across the canal. A rat scurries across a nearby beam and vanishes. A drunk stumbles past, singing to himself in a mixture of Dutch and French, one hand pressed to his chest like he's holding in some great truth. You step aside and let him pass. You stop at the edge of a courtyard where a group of neighbours are standing in a loose circle, speaking in hushed tones. One of them holds a folded piece of paper. Another keeps glancing toward a darkened alley. You don't interrupt. You've seen this before. It could be a birth announcement, or a death notice, or just another petition to the council. Paper travels fast in this city, but the stories behind it move even faster. As you turn to leave, the first drops of real rain begin to fall, slow, cold, and deliberate. You pull your hood up, but it doesn't help much. Nothing ever does. The oil lamps glisten now, halos in the mist. The city begins to shine in that strange way it only does when wet, reflecting itself, multiplying its own lights in the puddles and canals and windows. You walk slower now. The day is nearly done. Your boots are soaked, your hands cold, but your eyes are wide open. This is Amsterdam at night, smoky, slick, and dreaming out loud. You make it home just as the rain finds its rhythm, heavier now, drumming against the gabled roofs like impatient fingers on a tabletop. Your door sticks, swollen with damp, and you have to lean into it with your shoulder until it gives, creaking open into the narrow hall that always smells faintly of coal dust and last week's onions. You shut it behind you with a thud, and listen for a moment, just to be sure you're not tracking in anyone's shadow. No footsteps behind you, no voices, just the house, creaking in familiar ways. The interior is dim, lit only by the flickering flame of a lamp near the hearth. The fire's been started, or at least coaxed back into life, and a faint plume of smoke curls up through the chimney. The scent of wood smoke, damp wool, and boiled vegetables hits you with the kind of comfort only a lived-in house can offer. It's not luxurious, not even especially clean. But it's warm, and it's yours, for now. You hang your cloak on a peg near the door, dripping water onto the floorboards, and stoop to remove your boots. One squelches slightly. You peel it off with a sigh, and set it near the fire to dry. A pair of woolen slippers waits nearby, homemade, mismatched, and utterly necessary. You slide them on and stretch your toes with a small groan. From the next room, the low murmur of conversation floats in, familiar voices, family, neighbours, or that one tenant who's always staying just a few days more, but seems to have developed roots in the attic. You step into the kitchen, if you can call it that, a modest space with a soot-streaked hearth, a table worn smooth by generations, and a wall lined with earthenware mugs, each with a chip or a story, sometimes both. Two children sit at the table. One's threading a needle through a torn stocking. The other's supposed to be darning too, but instead he's trying to balance a spoon on his nose and failing gloriously. They look up when you enter and greet you with the kind of sleepy enthusiasm reserved for people who bring food or news. You give them a tired smile and tousle one head of hair. Someone's made soup. Pea, by the smell of it, and it's bubbling softly on the hearth, thick with potatoes, onion, and maybe a scrap of bacon if the week was lucky. You grab a ladle, fill 2 bowls, and set them in front of the kids before serving yourself. The first spoonful burns your tongue slightly, but you don't care. It's real food, and it's hot. You sit at the table, shoulders sagging as the heat begins to soak in. One of the children tells you about a rat spotted under the floorboards. The other swears they saw a man drop a gold coin into the canal and dive in after it. Both stories are probably true. The older woman who shares the house with you, your aunt, your mother, maybe just someone who's always been there, enters with a basket of mending and a look that could silence thunder. She nods to you, pours herself a mug of weak beer, and settles in to untangle a mess of string and wool. She doesn't ask where you've been. She knows. She always knows. For a while you eat in companionable silence, the only sounds being the crackle of the fire, the scrape of spoons, and the wind pressing against the windows like it's asking to come inside. The shutters hold, though they rattle. You pull your chair closer to the fire and let your fingers thaw. Fringe fact for your evening meal: Amsterdam households in the 1600s usually had one main meal per day, lunch. The evening meal was lighter, often leftovers or a simple soup, accompanied by beer and bread. Families clustered around the hearth not just for warmth, but for light. Oil was expensive. So was time. The day's work left you just enough energy to eat, mend, and maybe gossip a little before bed. One of the kids asks for a story. You groan playfully, but they're already shoving a half-burned candle into the centre of the table like it's a torch. You glance at the woman, who smirks into her sewing. She's not saving you, she never does. So you tell them one, the old tale of the woman who sewed a curse into her husband's shirt because he forgot her name during Mass. Or maybe it's the one about the ship that came back to port with a crew made entirely of cats, wearing sailors' hats and demanding salted fish. You embellish a little. They laugh. One of them tries to act it out and knocks over their bowl. The woman swears and grabs a rag to mop it up. You help, and for a moment the room is chaos. Spilled soup, laughter, muttered complaints, and a very damp stocking that now smells of peas. But then it settles again, and the hearth crackles and you realise that for now, everything's okay. Not great, not golden, but okay. You rise to check the windows, make sure they're latched. Outside, the city is still breathing. You see flickers of lamplight in neighbouring homes, silhouettes moving across curtains. A couple argues gently on the opposite bridge. A cat slinks along the edge of the canal, tail flicking. A barge passes slowly, lantern swinging, casting a long golden streak across the water. Inside, the fire dims and the children begin to nod off, heads drooping onto folded arms. You drape a shawl over one and scoop up the other, carrying them to their corner bed. The woman tucks in blankets without a word, lips pressed together in the way she always does when pretending she's not smiling. You sit again, letting the warmth of the hearth soak into your knees. The woman breaks the silence. "Council's raising the wood tax again," she says flatly. You grunt. "Of course they are." Another pause. "Plague's near the Norder marked." You nod. You already saw the red X. She doesn't say more. She doesn't need to. You sit there a while longer, the two of you, shoulders hunched, hands idle. Not quite speaking, not quite silent, just existing in the same small square of light against the night. Eventually the fire burns low. The candle gutters. The woman rises, stretches, and leaves the room with a small sigh. You stay a moment more, watching the embers. watching the city through the window. The rain has stopped. The street outside is slick and shining. The water in the canal reflects the stars, or at least something close enough to pass for them. You stand, stretch, and begin to blow out the lamps. One by one, the room darkens, until only the faintest red glow remains in the hearth. You gather your cloak from the peg, feel how dry it is now, and drape it over the chair. You step into the darkness of the stairs and climb quietly toward your bed. The next morning, the city is still slick from the night's rain, and the cobblestones shine like coins washed clean. But today, you're not heading to the docks or the market or any respectable place with ledgers or barrels. No, today's different, because after a week of salt, soot and sickness, you've earned it. Or maybe you just need it. A little escape, something bright, something foolish, something loud. You're going to the theatre. Well, a theatre, depending on what counts. You cross the canal, boots brushing through puddles already drying in the weak morning sun, and head toward the outskirts of the Jordan, where the scent of tanneries gives way to something stranger. Roasted nuts, citrus peels, warm ale, and sawdust. As you near the square, the noise picks up. A flute wheezes somewhere in the crowd. A drum answers it, offbeat and enthusiastic. Laughter rises like birds startled into flight. You turn the corner and see them. A small mob already gathered in front of the makeshift stage, eyes wide, jaws open. You recognise the troupe, Rederikers, the rhyming chamber poets turned travelling actors. Their stage is a cart dragged in from the countryside and repurposed with painted curtains, a splintered platform, and a trapdoor you wouldn't trust for more than half a goat. But no one minds. The magic is in the moment. You weave through the crowd. Someone hands you a warm cone of candied orange peel, still sticky, still bitter, and you suck on it as the actors launch into their first scene. It's a morality play, maybe, though not a very pious one. A farmer's daughter tricks a drunk bishop. A rich man loses his trousers in a bet. A demon appears with a puppet on a stick and demands back taxes. The crowd howls. The puppeteer grins. You catch yourself laughing too, mouthful of citrus and sarcasm. A man behind you starts heckling. Not cruelly, just enough to spice things up. One of the actors breaks character long enough to wink and throw a cabbage at him. The man ducks. The cabbage explodes against a wall. Children scream in delight. Someone nearby nearly chokes on a meat pie. You glance around at the audience. Everyone's here. Women in pearl-studded coifs, bricklayers with arms like tree trunks. Two merchants who are probably pretending not to be merchants. A pair of young lovers clutching each other like the cold will steal them if they let go. You even spot a city watchman pretending to patrol, but not moving an inch from his post near the food stall. Then there are the vendors, smoke curling from their makeshift grills, shoving sausages and roasted apples into greasy hands. One woman sells pickled cherries from a glass jar, hawking them as love potions. Another offers hot-spiced beer in cracked mugs with mysterious flecks floating on top. You buy one anyway. It burns all the way down and immediately clears out your sinuses, your doubts, and possibly your last bad decision. The play shifts into its second act, now involving a talking goose, a blindfolded mare, and a cart full of onions that seems to have gained sentience. It's absurd, it's brilliant, and it's yours, in this moment, freely given to a city that spends most of its time calculating cost. Fringe fact. While the Dutch Republic was known for its moral restraint, at least on paper, theatre flourished, especially in Amsterdam. From grand playhouses like the Skuburg to back-alley puppet shows, performances range from serious dramas to satirical comedies filled with bodily humour and biting political commentary. Church officials frowned. The crowds, they cheered. You finish your drink and toss the mug into a collection barrel where it clinks against others. A man near the stage collapses in laughter, tears running down his face, as the demon character returns dressed now as a tax collector, waving a chicken feather like a quill and demanding the blood of commerce. It's absurdly close to real life. You half expect someone from the VOC to step on stage and demand royalties. The troupe finishes with a song, loud, irreverent, completely off-key. The crowd joins in. You hum the last line under your breath as the actors bow and the curtain falls, or rather, drops with a thud and a yelp from someone who got tangled in it. Coins are tossed onto the stage, some of them land, others roll under the cart and are quickly claimed by children who've become experts in scavenging. As the crowd begins to disperse, you linger. One of the actors, his face still painted half red, half white, nods at you and offers a tired, crooked smile. You raise your mug in salute, forgetting it's empty. He laughs and disappears behind the cart. You turn to leave, the joy of the performance still buzzing behind your ribs like trapped songbirds. But the day's not over. Not yet. Not far off, another form of entertainment beckons. A man with a cart of curiosities, animal bones, shrunken heads, real or fake, who knows, jars of pickled creatures, and one taxidermied cat posed to look like it's reading a book. A small crowd gathers as he launches into his pitch. You stop and watch as he pulls out what he claims is the preserved hand of a pirate, then swears that if you touch it, you'll never lose a fight. A boy reaches out. His mother yanks him back. The man offers her a discount for the brave. She does not laugh. Past him, another vendor is juggling knives while standing on a barrel. He nearly drops one, then uses the fumble as part of the act. The crowd gasps, then claps when he bows. He moves on to torches next. You watch the flames spin through the air, barely contained, barely safe. Just like everything in this city. You walk a little more, hands in your pockets now, warm from the beer and the laughter. The buildings seem taller today, like they're stretching upward in admiration of the human madness below. You pass a street musician playing a sad tune on a hurdy-gurdy, hat on the ground, coins glinting inside. The song is lovely, plaintive and slow, and you drop in the last of your change without thinking. This is what the city does best. It surprises you. You think you know the routine, the markets, the canals, the shipping logs, the endless hunger. But then it opens a door you didn't see, pulls you into a world of puppets and pickled cherries, and reminds you that life isn't just about surviving. Sometimes it's about laughing until your stomach hurts, while a man in a fake devil costume chases someone with a fish. You head home through quiet streets, the shadows long now, the sun sliding down behind the roof lines. Your boots are dry, your cheeks are flushed, and there's a song still looping in your head about a drunk bishop and a goose named Bartle. You hum it under your breath, grinning. The quiet doesn't last. You return home full of sugar, warm beer, and the lingering echo of laughter still bouncing around your skull like a song you can't shake. But as you round the corner to your street, something shifts. The air is too still. Not the soft, sleepy kind of stillness that comes after a long day, but the tense sort. Like the city's holding its breath. You slow your steps instinctively. A candle flickers behind a shutter across the canal. A figure, there, then gone, moves behind it. On your own side of the water, someone standing near a stoop, back turned, head bowed. You pass them quietly, they don't look up. You feel it again, that shift beneath the city's skin. Gossip has a smell, and tonight it's thick in the air, sweeter than pipe smoke and twice as dangerous. Inside your own doorway you pause and listen. It's too early for the house to be fully quiet. No clinking spoons, no soft thud of boots upstairs, just the hush of a place that knows something and doesn't want to be the one to say it. You step into the kitchen and find the old woman from upstairs sitting stiffly at the table, her knitting untouched in her lap. She doesn't look up when you enter. Her jaw is clenched so tight you wonder how her teeth haven't cracked from the pressure. One of the children peers around the doorway, eyes wide. No one says anything for a moment. Then the woman finally speaks. "Did you know about them?" she asks. You blink. "Who?" She lifts her eyes, and they're sharp enough to cut glass. "The neighbours." You pause. You know better than to say which ones when the air's this charged. So you stay quiet and she goes on. "The ones at the end of the street. The man who always wore the blue hat. His wife never said much." She leans forward slightly. "Gone. All of them. Quietly. Last night. Took what they could carry." Now your mind catches up. The shutters always closed. The odd visitors. The way the man never seemed to age, and the wife always avoided Sunday markets. She leans back. "Papists, or Jews, or both." She says it not with hatred, but with the weary certainty of someone who's seen this play out 100 times. You sit down slowly. Of course you suspected. Everyone did. The prayer's not quite in rhythm with the rest of the street. The subtle avoidance of holy days. The whisper of a book hidden beneath the floorboards. But no one ever said anything. Not until now. Not until they were gone. Fringe fact. Amsterdam in the 1600s was paradoxically both a haven for refugees and a city constantly on edge about religion. Sephardic Jews fleeing the Inquisition found shelter here, provided they worshipped discreetly. Catholics, officially illegal, still practiced in secret hidden churches, sometimes right next door to devout Calvinists. Tolerance was a performance as much as a policy. You stand and move toward the front window. Outside, nothing looks different. The same water in the canal, the same cat slinking along the railing, but you notice it now, that the curtains at the neighbour's house are drawn tighter than usual, that the door is bolted from the inside when it never used to be, that someone has scrawled something in chalk near the stoop. It's already smudged by the rain, but you know what it was. A mark, a message, not official, worse, personal. Back at the table, the woman mutters something under her breath. A prayer, maybe, or a warning. You're not sure anymore. You sit back down and push your fingers through your hair. Do you think they'll be back, you ask? She shakes her head. Not unless they're fools. You spend the rest of the evening listening, not for footsteps on the stairs, but for murmurs through the walls, because the walls in this city are thin, and secrets echo louder than boots. You catch pieces, someone arguing behind the bakery, a man saying we should have known, a woman crying and trying not to, and then you hear something else, a low, breathy tune, a song. It's coming from 2 houses over, a voice singing softly, mournfully. Not Dutch, not French, something older. You don't understand the words, but the ache in them is clear. It's not a hymn, it's a goodbye. You let it wrap around you like smoke. Later you sit near the hearth, the fire low, and find yourself staring at the brick above the mantel. There's a small cross etched into the mortar, so faint you've never noticed it before. Or maybe it was never there until tonight. Either way, you touch it lightly and wonder how many other marks you've missed. How many other lives have passed through these rooms under different names, different prayers, different flags of safety. The city is layered like that. One home might be 5 stories high, but inside it holds 20 lives, each one slightly out of step with the other. That's Amsterdam, a place where you can vanish in plain sight if you know how to move quietly, and if your neighbours are more interested in tulip prices than doctrine. But it never lasts. Not forever. You stand and move to the window again. The house at the end of the street is completely dark now. No lamp, no movement. Just the outline of empty space where life once stood. You hear a voice from upstairs, one of the children asking if they're coming back. You don't answer, not because you don't know, but because saying no feels like agreeing with it. You return to the table. The old woman is still there, now sipping a mug of tea that's long gone cold. You sit beside her, neither of you speaking, just watching the candle burn low, watching the wax pool and harden and crack, like everything else that gets left behind in silence. Eventually you murmur, "We should check the stoop tomorrow, in case they left something." She nods. "Books, or letters, or food," you say, "something small." "Or a name," she replies softly, "so they're not forgotten." You both sit there, staring at the flame, knowing full well that names are only safe in whispers now. Loud ones get people noticed. Loud ones get doors kicked in before dawn. But whispers survive. Morning comes grey and slow, dragging itself over the rooftops like a tired cat unwilling to get up. You rub sleep from your eyes, blink against the watery light leaking through the shutters, and listen. No church bells yet, just the creak of the beams above your bed, the muffled clatter of hooves in the street below, and the familiar chorus of a city rising. Buckets clank, doors slam. Somewhere, a gull lets out an indignant screech, as if it too didn't ask to be awake. At that, you swing your legs over the edge of the bed and stretch, your joints clicking like old drawer hinges. The air is cold and damp, always damp, but tolerable. You dress in layers, as usual, linen, wool, and then the heavy outer coat that makes you feel a bit like you're wearing a rug with ambitions. Downstairs, the fire is already going. The woman has been up for hours, as always, already 3 steps into the day before the rest of the house can form coherent sentences. She hands you a crust of bread and a nod. You return both. Today, you're not staying in the neighbourhood. You've got business near the docks again, not for fish or freight, but for something more personal. Company. Not the candlelit kind, not the romantic kind. The talk until your throat's raw kind. Because sometimes the city's too loud inside your own head, and the only cure is someone else's story. You walk toward the Newmarkt, that great open square at the city's heart, where stalls are just being assembled, where the air smells of smoked eel, coal dust and fresh-cut vegetables. But you're not stopping here. You're aiming for a side street, one most people don't pay attention to because it looks like it's going nowhere. And in some ways, it does. But at the far end of that alley is a house with no sign, a door with no knocker, and a window always slightly open no matter the weather. You knock twice, then once more. The door opens. Inside, it's warmer than you'd expect and smells like ink, salt and garlic. It's a strange mix, but oddly comforting. A heavy-set man greets you with a smile that folds his entire face into laughter lines. His beard is greying, his sleeves rolled up, and he has ink on one cheek like he wiped it there in a dream. You call him Isaac. He's not from here. Not originally. He ushers you inside. The room is small, cluttered, and impossibly cosy. Books in every language stacked in unstable towers, maps tacked to the walls, a globe with a deep gash across Africa where someone's child dropped it years ago. A pot of something fragrant simmers on the hearth. You sit down on the cushion he always offers, and he pours 2 mugs of tea that taste like oranges and cardamom. Isaac is a Sephardic Jew from Portugal, one of many who fled the Inquisition years ago. His story is older than most of the buildings in this district. When he tells it, and sometimes he does, when the mood strikes, you can feel the weight of ships, the creak of hidden compartments, the cold silence of praying with no words. He speaks 5 languages, none of them loudly. He can quote scripture, translate poetry, and sell you silk with the same calm voice. But today, he's not in a storytelling mood. Today, he wants to listen. So, you talk. About the weather, yes, but also about the neighbours, about the disappearing family, about the city's moods, which change faster than a pickpocket's hands. Isaac listens, nods, and finally says, "It's not just the city, it's the season. People retreat in winter, not just from cold, but from each other." You ask him if he's ever thought of leaving. He chuckles. And go where? Amsterdam may frown, but it rarely bites. Other cities smile, then arrest you. He gestures toward the window where the sky has turned the colour of pewter. Besides, it's not just the laws, it's the people. You can hide here, but you can also be seen if you want to. You finish your tea and help him rearrange a stack of pamphlets. He's been writing again, you see. Translations of Hebrew texts into Dutch, which isn't exactly illegal, but isn't exactly encouraged either. You help him sort the pages, careful not to smudge the still wet ink. One of them is a poem about exile. Another is a treatise on mercy. He shrugs when you ask why he keeps writing them. Because silence tastes like ash, he says. Before you leave, he presses a pouch into your hand. Spices, he says. From home. Use them. Don't hoard them. Life's too short for bland food. You thank him, and he smiles again, tired this time, but genuine. As you step back into the street, the wind picks up and slices through your coat like a jealous blade. You tuck the pouch into your pocket and turn east, toward the edge of the neighbourhood. You pass a row of houses, some shuttered, some open, all quiet. One has a star carved above the door. Another has the word vreemd, stranger, scratched into the wood. You don't know who did it, but you know what it means. At the next corner, a cobbler is working outside his shop, squinting through thick glasses as he hammers a sole into place. You nod. He nods back. He's Polish, you think, or Lithuanian. His Dutch is clumsy, but his shoes are excellent, and that's what matters. He hums while he works, a low tune that sounds like something from a place with snow deeper than roofs and forests darker than candlelight. You stop and watch him for a moment. He doesn't speak, but his presence is enough. It's this, more than anything, that defines Amsterdam, the quiet mesh of lives from other worlds. People who brought their languages, their foods, their ghosts, and somehow built a city out of them. A noisy, stinking, marvellous patchwork of survival and stubborn hope. Fringe fact, in the 1600s, Amsterdam had more immigrants per capita than almost any other European city. German weavers, Huguenot printers, Scandinavian sailors, Portuguese Jews, English speculators, all crammed into neighbourhoods that became melting pots before anyone had invented the term. Some integrated, others remained separate. But together, they made the city what it was, complex, contradictory, alive. You keep walking past a bakery that smells of sesame and honey, past a boy selling salted nuts from a cart, past a girl drawing something in the dirt with a stick. She glances up at you, then back down. Her drawing looks like a ship, or a star, or both. You pass another house where the door is ajar, you catch a glimpse inside, candles burning low, a man wrapping something in cloth, then closing a trunk. You keep walking. Best not to ask. Everyone has reasons, everyone has exits. The canal gleams faintly ahead, and you stop at the railing to rest your hands on the cold metal. A barge passes beneath, carrying crates labelled in 5 languages. The boatman whistles a tune you recognise from Isaac's window. You smile. The city is still damp, still unpredictable, still full of names you'll never know and stories you'll only ever overhear. But today, at least, you've remembered something important. That this place wasn't built by sameness. It was built by strangers, survivors, wanderers and dreamers who packed their whole lives into a sack and chose to risk them on water. And somehow, against all odds, they built something solid. It's laundry day, and like most necessary things in life, it's both miserable and weirdly satisfying. The first thing you notice as you step outside is the air. It's clear, cold and biting, with just enough sun to be insulting. It promises warmth and delivers nothing but glare. Your breath steams as you walk, and your hands are already raw from the last time you wrung out a wool sheet the wrong way. Still, you've got a basket under your arm and a mission in your heart, and that's got to count for something. You make your way to the wash area behind the rows of houses near a small offshoot canal that smells less like death than usual today. There's already a crowd gathering, mostly women, sleeves rolled up, skirts tucked into belts, hair tied back in scarves. A few children scurry about with buckets, splashing water everywhere and getting yelled at for it. The communal washboards have been dragged out, their angled ridges ready to destroy another week's worth of skin. You claim a spot near a low wooden bench and dump your laundry with a resigned sigh. There's the usual mix: linens, shirts, stockings, rags that somehow feel more stained than they did when you wore them. You roll up your sleeves and plunge your hands into a basin of cold water. It's like being slapped by winter itself. The woman next to you grunts in sympathy. She's tall, square-shouldered, and already halfway through a mountain of clothes that could outfit a small army. She's humming a sea shanty under her breath and scrubbing like she's trying to erase someone from history. You nod at her. She nods back. That's as much of an introduction as you'll get, and it's all you need. Around you, the sounds of domestic chaos rise in harmony. Water splashing, brushes scrubbing, babies crying, women gossiping in half whispers that grow louder as the rhythm of work takes over. One woman tells a story about her brother's apprentice being caught stealing soap. Another shakes her head and says at least he wasn't caught with the brewer's daughter, unlike some people. A round of laughter follows that one. You pretend not to be interested, but you lean slightly closer all the same. Fringe fact, soap was a prized commodity in 17th century Amsterdam. Imported Castile soap was considered fancy, while locally made soaps range from passable to barely functional blocks of stinking lard and lye. Most families rationed it carefully. Scrubbing clothes without soap was common, but scrubbing with it? That was a statement. A social flex even. If you could afford to soap your underthings, you were doing just fine. Your knuckles sting as you scrub a particularly stubborn shirt. The water's gone grey from the collective efforts of the wash crew, but you're too far in now to care. Someone behind you yells at a child to stop drinking from the bucket, and another woman swears as her sheet falls off the line into the mud. A few others offer half-hearted sympathy, but no one stops working. Laundry waits for no one. You glance around and realise how much this ritual matters. Not the cleanliness necessarily, but the gathering. It's one of the few times people are allowed to just be together without ceremony. No church, no guild rules, no council forms, just backs bent over fabric and mouths full of stories. Next to you, the tall woman starts talking. She doesn't look at you as she speaks, just keeps scrubbing. Heard the council's raising water access taxes again? You grunt. They'll charge us for breathing next. They already do, she mutters. That's what the hearth tax is. You both snort, and it's enough to thaw the space between you. She asks where you live. You tell her, vaguely. She nods like that explains everything. Then she says she works for a printer, binding pages in the back room, hands always stained with ink even on Sundays. She lifts one palm to show you. She's right. Her fingers look like she's been dipping them in soot. The talk shifts, as it always does, to the disappearances. Someone down the way brings up the family who vanished last week. Someone else mentions the quiet shop that stayed locked up since Thursday. The laughter dies down a little, eyes shift. Scrubbing slows. But no one says what everyone's thinking, that people are leaving or being taken, and that you're better off not asking who or why. Then someone breaks the tension by letting go of a soap-covered shirt, which flies through the air and smacks another washer across the chest. A moment of stunned silence follows, then uproarious laughter. The wet-shirted victim retaliates with a bucket splash. It turns into a minor war. For a few glorious minutes, laundry is abandoned in favour of chaos. You duck just in time to avoid catching a handful of wet socks to the face. Eventually the battle dies down. The woman beside you grins, teeth crooked but honest. "Better than church," she says. You agree. After a couple of hours, your fingers have gone numb, your shoulders ache, and your laundry is clean, or at least less filthy than before. You wring out a sheet, hands shaking from the cold, and carry it over to a line strung between two crooked trees. Clothespins are at a premium, so you share yours with the woman beside you. She nods in thanks. You step back and look at the fluttering rows of linens, shirts, and undergarments, waving like surrender flags in the weak sunlight. It's strangely beautiful. The contrast of white fabric against the dull winter sky, the smell of soap and river water, the low hum of conversation. It's proof that something can be wrung out, dried, and used again. You linger for a moment longer before gathering your things. The wind picks up, tugging at your drying clothes, and you say a silent prayer that they'll stay put until they're done. You load the wet ones into your basket, shoulders burning with the weight, and nod farewell to the other women. The tall one raises a hand in salute. As you walk back toward your street, your arms aching and your hands raw, you realise you feel lighter somehow. Not physically, your spine would disagree, but inside. Like something heavy got aired out along with the linens. On the way home, you pass a cart selling hot root vegetable pies. You buy one, balancing it on top of the laundry, and bite into the flaky crust. It's steaming, peppery, a little sweet. It tastes like defiance. Like, yes, the taxes are rising, and the rumours are spreading, and the water is freezing, but here you are, still standing, still scrubbing, still feeding yourself something warm. When you reach your house, you lean against the door for a second before pushing it open with your hip. The woman is inside, stirring something in the pot. She glances at you, eyes flicking to the laundry, then back to the pot. "It dry?" You shake your head. "Tomorrow." She grunts. "Everything's tomorrow now." You set down the basket and stretch your back. Then you take a piece of clean cloth, a towel, maybe, or a shirt with only one hole, and toss it over her shoulder. She catches it, smirks, and keeps stirring. And for the first time all day, you smile without effort. The smell of something sour wakes you the next morning, sharp and rank like spoiled milk with an attitude. You sit up in bed, nose wrinkling, and immediately know what it is. You've smelled it before. Everyone in Amsterdam has eventually. It's the unmistakable stench of a burst chamber pot. You shuffle downstairs, feet dragging, and sure enough, the boy who rents the attic room is standing in the hallway with an empty pot in his hands and the world's guiltiest face. The puddle near the door confirms it. He opens his mouth to explain, maybe to blame the floorboards or a cursed dream, but you hold up a hand. No, just no. Chamber pots are a necessary evil in a city built on water and too few privies. Most people dump theirs into the canal. Some use the alleys. Others wait for night and toss it out the window with a warning yell. "Gardez l'eau." That's French for added flair. Or maybe because yelling "look out for the pea" in Dutch just isn't as theatrical. After the mess is cleaned, mostly with vinegar and dignity, you step outside desperate for air that isn't fermented shame. The sun's out, which feels personal, like the sky's mocking your morning. You decide to walk it off and head toward the single canal, your favourite stretch of water, when you need to remember that, yes, this city is ridiculous, but it's also beautiful in a way that creeps up on you. The Single is wide, smooth, and lined with trees that look skeletal now in winter. Black fingers against a pale sky. The water is calm today, a sheet of grey glass, and you stop at the edge, leaning on the rail. Reflected in the canal is the row of houses across the way, all crooked and leaning slightly forward, like they're eavesdropping on your thoughts. A barge floats by carrying barrels, its boatman smoking a pipe and steering with one foot propped casually on the tiller. You nod. He nods. That's how conversations work here when words aren't required. Behind you, a small dog barks as it chases a pigeon and loses. You don't know who owns it. Maybe no one. Maybe the dog owns the street. You walk along the canal's edge, passing under a bridge where two lovers are arguing. Not loudly, but with enough dramatic gesturing to suggest they've read too much bad poetry. You catch only a few words. Letters, late, You promised. The usual. You keep walking. Further along, you reach one of the city's most peculiar landmarks, the house with the narrowest facade. Barely wider than a closet, it clings to its neighbours like a nervous sibling. You stare at it, imagining what life must be like inside. Beds stacked like spoons, a staircase so steep it's more ladder than stairs, furniture wedged in at angles that defy geometry. Fringe fact, the narrow houses weren't just for show. Amsterdam taxed properties based on the width of their canal-facing fronts, not their overall size. So people got clever. Tall, deep houses with the thinnest possible facades. The result? A skyline that looks like a game of architectural Tetris about to collapse at any moment. As you admire the crooked beauty of it all, someone calls your name. You turn and see a woman you recognise from the market, Katrine, the one who sells ribbons and sometimes illegal dice. She walks like she owns the street and smells faintly of lavender, ash and secrets. You look like you've just buried a friend, she says, falling into step beside you. Worse, you reply, I buried a chamber pot.
She winces in sympathy. Say no more. Together, you stroll the canal path, passing shop fronts just opening their shutters. A bookseller is sweeping the steps. A cat licks itself in the display window like it's been hired to do performance art. A hat maker arranges a row of ridiculous feathered monstrosities that look like they could take flight without a wearer. You and Katrine trade updates. She tells you that 2 new constables have been posted at the bridge, supposedly to prevent smugglers. You raise an eyebrow. Everyone knows the smugglers are the constables, or at least drink with them. She also mentions a pamphlet circulating through the taverns. Something political, maybe satirical, definitely offensive. You make a mental note to find a copy. As you pass a bakery, the scent of warm rye and caraway stops you both in your tracks. Inside, a boy barely taller than the counter is placing loaves into baskets, his face serious as a priest. You tap the glass. He doesn't look up. You buy 2 rolls anyway, one for you, one for Katrine. She takes hers and mutters something about carbohydrates being the only reliable lovers. You walk and eat, and for a moment, the city is bearable. More than bearable. It's charming, even. The sun glints off the canal. Bells toll the hour. A breeze picks up and carries the smell of baking, tobacco, and whetstone. You feel strangely clean, like the morning's catastrophe has been scrubbed away by walking, talking, and warm bread. Eventually, you reach the end of the path, where the canal bends toward the harbor. Ships loom in the distance, tall, skeletal rigs waiting to be filled with silk, spices, or sometimes just men who'll never return. You watch them a while, the way you might watch fire. They're too far to touch, but they burn all the same. Katrine nods toward one of them. They say that one's headed for Batavia. You nod. I hope it makes it. She shrugs. Half of them don't. But the other half come back rich, so what's a little death between friends? You both stare at the ships in silence. It's not a sad silence, but it's not happy either. It's the silence of people who understand the cost of movement and the weight of staying still. Fringe debate, historians still argue whether Amsterdam's 17th century wealth was truly sustainable, or if it was just a glittering bubble inflated by colonial extraction and risky speculation. Some say it was genius commerce. Others say it was just well-organized plundering. The truth, as usual, probably smells like both. Eventually, you and Katrine part ways. She disappears into the crowd, her ribbon cart squeaking behind her like a tiny parade. You head home, walking slower now, your morning detour stretching longer than planned. Back on your street, someone's throwing water out the window. You dodge just in time. The boy with the chamber pot gives you a sheepish grin from the stoop. You roll your eyes and kick the door open with one boot. Inside, the house smells like stew, laundry, and soap. A miracle, honestly. You hang up your coat, slide onto the bench near the window, and watch the street unfold. A girl carries a chicken in a sack. A man balances 6 loaves on one arm. A cat chases something only it can see. You lean back, warm bread still in your mouth, and think, not for the first time, that this city is ridiculous. And somehow, exactly right. The church bells start before dawn. Not the slow, solemn chimes of Sunday services, but the frantic, off-rhythm clanging of something gone wrong. You sit up, tangled in blankets, heart already galloping before your mind catches up. They're shouting in the street, boots running. A sharp whistle blows, once, then twice. That's the City Watch's signal. You swing your legs over the side of the bed and curse softly as your bare feet hit the cold floor. Downstairs, the old woman is already at the door, peeking through the warped slats of wood as if expecting to see the devil himself on the stoop. "Something's burning," she mutters, not turning to look at you. You smell it now, acrid and thick, like oil and damp wood and smoke that's trying to chew through your lungs. You step up beside her, and for once she doesn't shoo you away. You push the door open, and the city greets you in chaos. The fire's not on your street, but it's close enough. You can see the sky glowing orange behind the rooftops, a sick, pulsing light that flickers through the cracks between houses. The smoke moves low, hugging the street like it knows its way around. Somewhere in the distance, someone's screaming, not in panic, but pure rage. You throw on your coat, boots half-laced, and head toward the commotion. Others are doing the same, neighbors clutching buckets, shawls over their faces, eyes wide and wet in the cold. At the corner, a woman grabs your arm and points. "It's the rope maker's house, the big one near the tannery." Then she's gone, swallowed up by smoke and urgency. You break into a jog, weaving through the crowd, breath catching in your throat from more than just exertion. Around the next corner, the fire becomes real, a towering inferno clawing through the second floor of a long, narrow building with smoke pouring from every window like it's trying to escape. Flames lick the roof tiles, and sparks shoot upward, disappearing into the gray morning. A line has already formed from the canal to the house. Neighbors, laborers, even two sailors from the nearby docks, passing buckets hand to hand. You fall into line without thinking, the icy water splashing onto your coat as you pass it along. No one speaks much, just grunts, curses, the occasional barked command. You catch sight of the rope maker, or what's left of him, kneeling in the mud, face black with soot, arms limp. Someone's talking to him, but he's staring straight ahead like his thoughts haven't caught up yet. You think about the miles of rope he must have made in that building, the hours of coiling, drying, twisting, all gone in minutes. A child is pulled from the building, alive, barely. Her hair's half burned, face streaked with ash, wrapped in a shawl that's clearly not hers. She's passed from hand to hand like a miracle. Someone behind you crosses themselves. You just keep passing buckets. Fringe fact: Amsterdam's buildings were packed so tightly, fires spread fast. And with most homes made of wood, coated in tar, or stuffed with flammable things like textiles and rope, it didn't take much to ignite a disaster. Official fire brigades existed, but mostly it was neighbors saving neighbors, or watching them burn. Eventually, the flames shrink back. The bucket line slows. The roof collapses inward with a horrible crack, and a wave of smoke washes over the street like a final exhale. You step back, coughing, eyes streaming, and look around. The cobblestones are slick with soot and water. A cat darts from a doorway. Somewhere behind you, a man is sobbing softly. The sun has risen by now, though it doesn't seem to make a difference. The sky's still smudged gray, the light sickly. You step away from the scene, boots squelching through ash, and find a stoop to sit on. Your fingers are trembling, your arms sore. You smell like smoke and canal water and fear. And you're not even the one who lost everything. A woman next to you, hair streaked with flour, probably pulled straight from her bakery, hands you a cloth. "For your eyes," she says. You take it, grateful, and press it to your face. It smells faintly of yeast and rosewater. Eventually, you stand again, legs stiff. People are already picking through the wreckage, seeing what can be salvaged, if anything. Most of it is gone. Rope doesn't burn. It devours itself. One man pulls out a charred pulley block and holds it like it's a holy relic. You head home slowly, your body aching, your mind buzzing with smoke and heat and the raw immediacy of disaster. On the way, you pass the woman with the ribbon cart, Katrin. She's unharmed but quiet, her usual smirk gone. She nods at you. Woke up thinking the sky was on fire, she says. You nod back. It was. The boy with the chamber pot is sweeping the stoop when you return. He glances at your soot-covered clothes and wisely says nothing. Inside, the old woman is boiling water, her sleeves rolled up, jaw tight. She hands you a cup of something warm, dark, and probably medicinal. You drink it anyway. Later, you sit by the window, watching the street. The wind has changed, and the smoke is drifting elsewhere now, toward the docks, perhaps, or across the rooftops into another quarter. The world continues. A girl walks by with a basket of eggs. A cart full of hay creaks down the lane. Someone's playing a flute, off-key but determined. But the fire stays with you. It lingers in your nose, your hair, your bones. It reminds you how fragile the whole thing is. This city, this life. These stacked, leaning houses full of people trying to keep warm without catching the whole street ablaze. You think about the rope maker, about how his life unraveled in front of everyone, how quickly fire can turn something useful into nothing at all. Fringe debate. Historians still argue whether 17th century Amsterdam's urban planning helped prevent widespread destruction or just delayed the inevitable. Some claim the canals acted as fire breaks. Others say the city was one gust of wind away from turning into a floating funeral pyre. The truth probably lives in the soot lines on your coat. As night falls, the church bells ring again, this time solemn and slow. A death toll, or maybe a warning. You blow out the lamp, pull the blanket tighter around your shoulders, and lie in the dark listening to the city breathe. Outside, someone coughs. Inside, you finally exhale. The days after the fire move differently, slower, heavier, like the whole neighborhood is trudging through molasses. The usual rhythms still tick along, the milk deliveries, the cries of street vendors, the stink of the canal, but it's all muffled, as if someone's laid a blanket over the city, and now everything is too quiet, too damp, and entirely too aware of its own fragility. You find yourself walking back to the ruins more than once. Not because there's anything left to see, just blackened beams, a scorched pulley wheel, a patch of ash that used to be a workbench, but because something about the wreckage pulls at you. Other people stop and stare too, standing in clusters like mourners at a wake without a body. Every now and then, someone stoops to pick through the soot for a scrap of cloth or a nail that didn't melt. It's like the city's trying to find proof that something survived. The rope maker's family hasn't returned. No one's sure where they've gone, or if they even had somewhere to go. Someone says they were taken in by relatives on the north side of the harbor. Someone else swears they saw the daughter boarding a boat to Harlem with soot still on her face. The stories vary, but the ache they leave is consistent. Loss lingers like smoke. You head toward the market, not because you need anything in particular, but because sometimes walking helps the mind settle. The stalls are half full, less vibrant than usual, like even the fishmonger knows today isn't the day to shout about eels. A few vendors give you solemn nods, the kind reserved for survivors. You didn't lose a house, but you smelled the burn, felt the heat. That counts for something. You pause at a spice stall run by an elderly couple who've been here longer than anyone remembers. Their hands are stained yellow from turmeric, and their voices are soft, always in sync. Today, they're unusually silent. You buy a handful of cinnamon sticks and clove, not because you need them, but because the smell reminds you of something safe. The woman tucks a tiny sachet of dried orange peel into your bag. A gift. No charge. Her eyes are kind and tired. You stop next at a stall selling scrap paper and old ink pots. It's run by a boy no older than 12, who claims his father used to write for the city council, though no one's ever confirmed it. You buy a few sheets, thin, rough, but blank, and ask if he's heard anything about the new pamphlets. He shakes his head. Then, after a moment, slides a folded scrap across the table with a wink. You don't open it until you've walked away. The pamphlet is crude, barely legible, but biting. A woodcut of a merchant sitting on a pile of gold, while flames lick at his house. The caption reads, "Even God won't count your coins when your roof is gone. Subtlety is not the style here. You smile despite yourself, then fold it neatly and tuck it into your coat. It's probably illegal, which means it's probably worth keeping. Fringe fact, underground publishing in Amsterdam was booming by the 1600s. Banned pamphlets, satirical broadsheets, forbidden tracts. They were printed in backrooms, passed hand to hand, and sometimes read aloud in taverns to audiences who liked their politics with a side of beer. The city's printers played a dangerous game, but the appetite for forbidden words was bottomless. You wander the market for a while longer, drifting like smoke from stall to stall. You overhear a baker complaining about the rising cost of grain, a brewer muttering about watered-down competition from across the canal, a girl telling her mother she saw a devil dancing in the ruins of the rope-maker's house. Her mother doesn't scold her, just tells her not to go near it again. You buy a wedge of hard cheese and a heel of brown bread from the baker with the lazy eye. He tells you his brother once ran a rope shop too, back before a lightning strike took it out. Fire likes rope, he says, as if it's a known personality trait. You nod. Fire likes everything. He laughs, bitter and short. Except water, but there's never enough of that when it counts. You return home as the sun slips behind the rooftops, casting everything in a soft, slanted gold. The smoke smell has mostly faded from your clothes, but you catch hints of it when the wind shifts. Inside, the woman has set the table with 2 bowls of stew. She doesn't say where she got the meat. You don't ask. You eat in silence for a while, both of you chewing mechanically, heads down. Eventually, she clears her throat. Council's talking about stricter codes. You raise an eyebrow. Now? She shrugs. Too little, too late, but it keeps them busy. You both know the truth. The fire will be talked about for a week, maybe 2. Then it'll be folded into the city's long list of disasters, like the Great Flooding, the Plague Years, the time the bridge collapsed with a full wedding party on it. People will mourn, then joke, then forget. Because forgetting is easier than preparing for it to happen again. Later that night, you can't sleep. You sit by the window, watching the moon shimmer in the canal. You pull out the pamphlet again, fingers tracing the outline of the crude illustration. It's funny, in a sharp, painful way, but there's something more. A warning, maybe, or a reminder. You light a candle and take one of the blank pages from earlier, set it on the table, and begin to write. Not a poem, not a report, just a list of names, of places, of smells and sounds from the fire. You don't know why you're doing it. Maybe because something needs to be remembered. You write slowly, the ink blotting and smearing where your fingers shake. But you don't stop. Even when the candle burns low and your eyes start to blur, you keep going. Line after line, thought after thought. At some point you hear the wind change, the faint creak of a shutter, the whistle of air squeezing between bricks, but you keep writing. Because in this city, memories burn faster than wood, and some things deserve to be saved. Morning drips in slowly, like wax from a tired candle. The street outside is still damp, still dark in the corners, but the bells chime 7 times and refuse to be ignored. You sit at the table with a cup of watered-down beer and a cold heel of bread, staring at the page you left unfinished the night before. The ink has bled slightly, just enough to make the last word unreadable. It's fitting. Amsterdam doesn't offer closure, just the next thing to do. You tuck the paper into the pocket of your coat, not because it's important, necessarily, but because it feels like ballast. Something to carry, something to keep you grounded. Then you stand, stretch, and prepare for what might be the most harrowing part of the week, Guild Inspection Day. The city's guilds are not to be trifled with. They are the lifeblood of Amsterdam's economy, its gatekeepers and rule makers, equal parts business and bureaucracy. Whether you stitch leather, grind pigment, or sell fish heads 3 times removed from the sea, if you're working, you're under their watchful eyes. Today, those eyes are visiting your end of town. You head toward the Central District, where the Guild of St. Luke is stationed. Not because you're a painter, but because the Inspector for Miscellaneous Crafts is holding office hours there this week. You pass by a man nailing new wood over his window frame, the one that cracked during the fire. He doesn't look up. He's been hammering since dawn. That's how you know he's nervous. When you reach the square, a crowd has already formed. Some people in neat coats holding ledgers, others fidgeting with tools in their aprons. You nod to a girl you recognize from the dye house. Her hands are permanently stained indigo, and her knuckles are raw. She tries to smile, but it comes out crooked. The inspector's assistant emerges from the doorway with a clipboard and a scowl. "Names," he barks. "State your trade and your proof." You murmur your name and occupation, vague enough to cover the various tasks you've done, clear enough not to raise suspicion. You hand over your paperwork. It's creased and slightly damp, but the ink is still legible. The assistant grunts and waves you toward a bench to wait. Waiting is half the job in Amsterdam. Waiting for goods to arrive, for news to travel, for doors to open or close. You sit beside a man sharpening a bone-handled knife and listen as he explains to no one in particular how the blade was once used to carve meat for the stadtholder himself. You don't believe him, but you nod politely anyway. Inside the guild hall, it smells of parchment, wax, ink, and coffee that's been reheated too many times. Your turn comes faster than expected, and suddenly you're standing in front of a table where 3 men sit. All of them dressed like their mothers never let them play outside. Their wigs are powdered. Their faces are blank. They ask you questions. You answer. They nod, write things down, exchange glances that make your stomach twist. One asks about your hours. Another wants to know where you source your materials. A third asks how much you tithe to the guild. You tell the truth, mostly. Then, the pause. The one that always comes just before a judgment. You brace yourself. The lead inspector looks up. You'll need to file a secondary permit for mixed labor. It's not proper for someone registered in textiles to assist in dye work without guild-specific approval. You blink. I wasn't dyeing, I was lifting crates. Same dye house, he replies, as if that answers anything. Fringe fact, guilds in 1600s Amsterdam were notoriously territorial. Many trades overlapped, but if you so much as looked at a task outside your registered skill set, someone would fine you for it. Want to stitch a button on a hat? Better be in the Hatmakers Guild and the tailors. Otherwise, that's illegal needlework. You nod stiffly and accept the paper they hand you, an official warning, neatly folded and sealed in red wax. It feels heavier than it should. You thank them, walk out, and let the door close behind you with a quiet thud. Outside, the square hasn't changed. The same hopeful faces waiting for the same indifferent judgment. You stuff the warning in your coat and walk quickly toward the canal, needing to breathe. At the edge of the water, you sit on a bench and let your shoulders sag. The breeze picks up, tugging at your coat. Across the canal, a woman dumps a bucket from her second-story window. You dodge instinctively. You're learning. It hits you then, how precarious everything is. Not just fire, or plague, or politics, but paperwork, permits, the endless stack of forms that make up the real skeleton of the city. People talk about walls, trade routes, and fleets, but it's the ledgers and stamps that hold the bones together. You lean back and close your eyes for a moment. Somewhere behind you, someone's playing a fiddle. Not well, but earnestly. A song with too many notes. It helps. After a while, you rise and start walking again, this time without direction. You wander through narrow alleys where the sun never quite reaches the ground. Past rows of laundry still dripping from last week's wash. Past a man asleep in a wheelbarrow. Past a group of children making a game out of kicking frozen clumps of horse dung. You end up in the Begijnhof, though you didn't mean to. It's a quiet courtyard, ringed by houses that seem older than the city itself. A haven within the madness. The Begijns here live simple lives, religious, mostly celibate, entirely uninterested in guild regulations. You pass through silently, grateful for the stillness. In the center stands the chapel, and beside it, a tree older than memory. Its bark is twisted, its roots reaching like hands through the soil. You sit at its base and exhale. A young beguine passes by, basket in hand. She doesn't speak, but nods at you with a kind of understanding that doesn't require language. You nod back. The moment passes. but it stays with you longer than it should. Fringe debate. Some historians argue that the Beguines were early feminists, living independently, outside traditional marriage or monastic life. Others insist they were just practical women tired of everyone else's nonsense. Either way, they kept records better than most governments, and they outlived more than one revolution. You stay under the tree until the bells chime again. This time they feel softer, like an apology. You rise, stretch, and walk slowly back home. At your door, the old woman is already waiting. She hands you a bowl of soup and doesn't ask where you've been. You eat it sitting on the stoop, watching the sun stretch long across the rooftops. It's not a good day, but it's not a bad one either. It's just Amsterdam, stacked, strange, and standing.